The rifle hit the concrete floor like a gunshot. Every head in the training bay snapped toward the sound. Sergeant Luke Harrison stood over the new lieutenant, arms crossed, smirking at his own joke. 20 experienced operators waited for her to crack, to cry, to quit. She didn't do any of those things. She bent down, picked up the rifle, and looked at him with eyes that had seen things he couldn't imagine. Nobody knew her name yet. Nobody knew her history. But on her left forearm, half hidden beneath her sleeve, was a symbol that should have made every single person in that room go quiet. It didn't. That was their first mistake. If you're new here, subscribe now and follow this story all the way to the end. You will not want to miss what happens next. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The drive into Port Sterling took 4 hours from the nearest airport, and every mile looked like the last one. Spruce trees pressed tight against the two-lane highway, granite shoulders dropping into black water, fog sitting low over the inlets like something that had given up trying to move. It was the kind of coast that didn't welcome people. It endured them. Maya Bennett drove herself. No escort, no welcome committee. She'd been given a case number, a gate code, and a printout with the unit address. That was the full extent of Naval Special Operations Unit 14's enthusiasm for her arrival. She didn't mind. She'd learned a long time ago that the way a place received you told you almost everything you needed to know about it. She pulled her rental, a gray Ford with a cracked dashboard and 60,000 miles on it, into the gravel lot outside the main building and sat for a moment with the engine running. The rain was coming down sideways, the kind that found every gap in your collar and ran cold down your spine. She studied the building through the windshield. 2-story concrete. No signage beyond a small placard beside the main entrance. 4 cameras visible on the exterior, plus one she suspected was hidden in the overhead light fixture above the side door. The guard post had 2 men, but only one was paying attention. The other was looking at his phone. She noted the positions of the vehicles in the lot. Which ones were backed in for fast exit, which ones hadn't moved in days based on the leaf accumulation on the hoods. She counted the windows on the second floor, checked the roofline. Then she turned off the engine, grabbed her bag, and got out into the rain. She didn't run for the door. She walked at the same pace she always walked. From the second-floor window, Commander Nathan Cole watched her cross the lot. He'd been watching since she turned off the highway. He watched her sit in the car before getting out. He watched her eyes move across the building's exterior like someone conducting a quiet survey. 32 years in special operations had taught Cole to read body language the way other people read text. And the way this woman moved, deliberate, unhurried, aware, didn't match the file sitting on his desk. He looked down at it again. Lieutenant Maya Bennett, age 28. Transfer from Administrative Reassignment Branch, Naval Personnel Command. Previous assignment? Classified. Medical clearance, current. Psychological evaluation, satisfactory. 1 page. That was it. In 32 years, Cole had never seen a transfer file this thin. New personnel arrived with service records, evaluation chains, commendation histories. Even bad officers arrived with documentation of how they'd been bad. This woman had 1 page. He picked up his coffee, which had gone cold an hour ago, and drank it anyway. "Barker," he said without turning from the window. His aide appeared in the doorway. "Sir?" "Get Sergeant Harrison." "What?" The administrative corridor smelled like floor wax and old coffee, the same smell as every military building Maya had ever walked into. She stood at the front desk while a corporal with the name tape OK4 typed something without looking up at her. "Bennett?" Okafor said, still not looking up. "That's me." "Room assignments in Building C. Orientation packets in the folder." He slid a manila envelope across the counter without making eye contact. "Commander Cole will see you at 0700 tomorrow." Maya took the envelope. "Is there a range schedule I can get access to?" Okafor looked up for the first time. He had the expression of someone who had just been asked a mildly surprising question by a houseplant. "You just got here." "I'm aware." "Range access goes through your direct supervisor, who you haven't met yet." "Right." She tucked the envelope under her arm. "Thanks." She found Building C without asking for directions. She'd memorized the base layout from the satellite image she'd pulled 2 weeks before arriving. Her room was on the ground floor, end of the hallway, which she appreciated. One wall was exterior concrete, one window, north-facing. She could hear the water from the inlet when the wind shifted. She set her bag on the metal-framed bed, sat down on it, and looked at the wall. The springs complained under her weight. She'd slept in worse places. She pulled the transfer folder from the envelope and read through it with the focused, almost mechanical attention she gave to pre-mission briefings. Base protocols, chain of command, emergency procedures, meal schedules. The kind of document that told you everything about administrative structure and nothing about what actually happened inside the unit. At the back of the packet, someone had handwritten a note on a sticky tab. "Stay in your lane, Lieutenant. No signature." Maya peeled the note off, read it once more, and set it on the bed beside her. Then she put her gear away, made the bed with the corners squared, and went to find the armory. Sergeant First Class Luke Harrison had been with Unit 14 for 11 years. He was 39, built like a man who had been put together with efficiency rather than aesthetics. Wide through the shoulders, thick-necked, with hands that looked like they'd been used as tools for most of his adult life. He had a silver scar running through his left eyebrow from a training accident he refused to explain, and he ran the unit's training operations with the particular authority of someone who had been there long enough to believe the place belonged to him. When Cole told him about the new transfer, Harrison's first question was, what unit was she coming from? File doesn't say. That was all Harrison needed to hear. He found her in the mess hall that evening, eating alone at the far end of the last table. She'd chosen the seat with her back to the wall and a clear sightline to both exits. Harrison noticed that. He chose not to care about it. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down without being invited. "You're the new LT," he said. She looked up from her food. "Bennett." "Harrison. I run training operations." He leaned back in the chair and looked at her the way people look at something they've already decided is a problem. "What's your background?" "It's in my file." "I read your file." "Then you know." "Your file doesn't say anything." She held his gaze and didn't fill the silence. Harrison let the pause sit for a few seconds, then smiled the way men smile when they've already decided how a conversation is going to end. "Look, I'm not trying to start something. I just want to know what we're working with. This unit handles sensitive operations. We don't do babysitting." "I didn't ask to be babysat." "Where were you before this?" "Reassignment branch." "Before that?" She picked up her fork. "Classified." The word landed flat and factual. No defensiveness, no apology. Harrison's jaw tightened slightly, and Maya saw it, and she went back to her food. Harrison stood up from the chair. 0600, Training Bay. Bring your PT gear and your service weapon." He walked away without waiting for a response. Maya finished her dinner. The training bay at 0600 was a large, high-ceilinged space with rubber flooring, overhead strip lighting, and the particular echo that came from concrete walls and steel racks. By the time Maya arrived, there were 20 operators already there, men ranging from early 20s to mid-40s, in various states of warming up or pretending to warm up while actually watching the door. When she walked in, the noise level dropped by about 30%. She'd expected that. What she hadn't entirely anticipated was the speed of it, the way the room's attention locked onto her like a sensor acquiring a target. She was the only woman in the space. She was also significantly smaller than most of the men in it, and she was new, which in a place like this made her a temporary curiosity at best, and a designated test subject at worst. She clipped her holster to her hip, set her water bottle on the bench, and started stretching. Harrison walked in 2 minutes later, already looking satisfied about something. "Good morning, Unit 14. He didn't look at Maya when he said it, but the pause after made it clear who he was talking to. "We have a new addition to our team. Lieutenant Maya Bennett has joined us from—" He spread his hands in a shrug. "Somewhere." A few people laughed. "This morning we're doing PT assessment. 3 miles, obstacle course, then a station evaluation." He turned to Maya for the first time. "You good with that, Lieutenant?" "Ready," she said. "Outstanding." The run wasn't designed to break her. It was designed to make her look slow. Harrison set the pace, fast enough that it wasn't comfortable, structured so that the group naturally pushed at the front, and anyone who fell behind became visible. Maya ran in the middle of the pack. She didn't push to the front, she didn't fall back. She maintained a pace that looked easy and made no effort to demonstrate that it was easy. Around the second mile, a young operator with a Brooks name tape dropped in beside her. "You run a lot?" he asked. "Some." "You don't look like you're working hard." "I'm not," she said. He almost tripped. She kept running. The obstacle course was rougher, a series of walls, rope climbs, crawl tunnels, and balance elements set up across a quarter-acre of wet grass. The rain hadn't stopped, and everything was slick. Two operators took minor falls on the low wall. One came off the rope climb at a bad angle and landed hard enough to draw concerned looks. Maya went through the course at a pace that was unremarkable until it suddenly wasn't. She cleared the 12-foot wall on her first attempt, which she noticed surprised some people. The rope climb she did in a way that several of the men couldn't. She used a specific technique, three-point anchor, body rotation on the way up. That was faster on a wet rope than brute arm strength. She didn't explain the technique. She just did it and moved on. Harrison watched from the edge of the course with his arms crossed and said nothing. In the station evaluation, she was assigned to a live fire qualification, 50 meters, iron sights, standard silhouette target. She was given a weapon she'd never fired because they hadn't issued her a service weapon yet. So Harrison handed her one from the rack without telling her its maintenance history or zero. She examined it for 10 seconds before she loaded it. She put 38 out of 40 rounds in the center mass zone. The two that were slightly off were her first two, while she was calibrating the unfamiliar zero. Harrison marked her sheet without comment. The moment everyone would talk about later came at noon. The unit had broken for lunch, and Maya had gone back to the armory to return her borrowed weapon. She was in the process of logging it when Harrison came in with most of the team behind him. He was carrying a rifle, one of the M4 variants from the cleaning rack, and he crossed the room and dropped it on the floor at her feet. The crack of metal on concrete was loud in the enclosed space. Everyone stopped. "That one needs a full breakdown and inspection," Harrison said. "Maintenance logs haven't been updated in 3 months. The armory sergeant signed off on paperwork that doesn't match the physical condition of this weapon." He kept his eyes on Maya. "Since you're the new lieutenant, and since you need to understand how we operate here, you're going to clean every weapon in this room and file a complete inspection report." Maya looked at the rifle on the floor. Then she looked around the room. 28 rifles on the right rack, 6 machine guns on the left, cleaning equipment stored in the cabinet at the far end. "All of them?" she said. "All of them. Before tomorrow's first formation." First formation was 0600. It was currently 1240. Someone in the back of the room made a sound that might have been a laugh. "There anything else you need to tell me?" Maya asked. Harrison tilted his head slightly, like he was waiting for her to argue. "You have a problem with the order, Lieutenant?" She looked at him for a moment. Something moved in her expression. Not anger, not quite. Something more considered than that. "No," she said. She bent down and picked up the rifle from the floor. The room waited for the argument that didn't come. Then people started filing out, and a few of them were already talking quietly. Harrison left last, and he looked back at her once before he went through the door. She was already pulling the cleaning kit from the cabinet. The armory at midnight was quiet except for the rain and the sound of her working. Maya had been in the room for 11 hours. She'd developed a system in the first 20 minutes and hadn't deviated from it since. Each weapon was taken from its rack, logged with a check-in time, broken down into its components, inspected for corrosion, wear, and damage, cleaned, lubricated, and reassembled. She recorded every serial number, every observable defect, every maintenance discrepancy against the existing logs. The existing logs were a mess. Not every weapon. Some were clean, well-maintained, properly documented. But there were patterns in the ones that weren't. Missing signatures, date gaps. Notes in the margins in 2 different handwriting styles suggesting someone had been retroactively filling in records that should have been completed at the time. Maya set those aside. She didn't just clean them. She photographed the discrepancies with her phone, noted the corresponding serial numbers, and cross-referenced them against the mission deployment logs that were filed in the binder on the armory shelf. She was halfway through the 3rd weapon grouping when she noticed the deployment pattern. The weapons with the worst maintenance records, the ones with signatures that didn't match, the ones with date gaps, had all been signed out for the same series of training exercises. Exercises that, according to the log, had been authorized by a single administrator. She set down the cleaning rod and looked at the name on the signature line. She looked at it for a long time. Then she went back to cleaning. Evan Brooks couldn't sleep. It happened sometimes after long evaluation days. His body was tired, but his mind kept running, replaying movements, replaying times, running the math on where he could be faster or stronger or better. He was 24 and he'd been with the unit for 8 months, and he still hadn't fully convinced himself he belonged here. He suspected some of the older operators could see that. At 12:40 in the morning, he got up, pulled on a shirt and boots, and walked the base perimeter the way he did when his head wouldn't quiet down. He passed the armory and noticed the light was still on. He stood outside the door for a moment. Through the small window, he could see her. She was on the floor, surrounded by organized components and carefully arranged cleaning tools, working through a disassembly with the kind of efficiency that didn't look like effort. She had a notepad open beside her, and she was cross-referencing something from a binder, and she moved from one task to the next without pausing, without hesitation, the way people moved when they'd done something so many times it had become part of how they breathed. He opened the door. She didn't jump. She didn't look startled. She looked up from what she was doing and registered him with the particular calm of someone who had heard his footsteps from 30 feet away and already decided he wasn't a threat. "Brooks?" she said. "Yeah." "Hi." He looked around the room. "You're, still going?" "Yeah." "How many have you done?" She glanced at the rack. "About 2/3. He stepped further into the room and looked at the organized spread of components on her right side. Everything was labeled, color-coded almost. He'd never seen anyone break down weapons that cleanly, that systematically, like a surgeon laying out instruments. "Where'd you learn to do it that way?" She picked up a cleaning rod and fed it through a barrel. "My father, when I was a kid." "Your father's military?" She didn't answer right away. "He was." There was something in the way she said it. Evan had grown up around people who'd lost family members in service. The way a person held that loss was different from regular grief. It was denser, more matter-of-fact. Was he special operations? She looked at him for a moment. The question had landed somewhere specific, and she was deciding how much to give back. "He knew his way around a rifle," she said finally. Evan nodded. He sat down on the floor against the wall. Not close to her work, not in the way, just sat. The way people sat when they weren't ready to go back to their rooms. "Harrison's going to come in tomorrow expecting it to be a disaster," he said. "I know. It's not going to be." "I know that too." He looked at her profile while she worked. "Why didn't you argue with him about the order?" She didn't stop cleaning. "Because arguing would have told him exactly what I was thinking, and I didn't want him to know what I was thinking." Evan sat with that for a moment. "What were you thinking?" She looked at him again, and this time there was the faintest edge of something in her expression. Not a smile exactly, something that would become a smile under different circumstances. "That this was exactly where I needed to be," she said. He didn't fully understand what she meant. He would understand it later, when everything came apart and came back together in ways nobody in the unit had anticipated. But sitting on the armory floor at 12:40 in the morning, listening to the rain and the sound of metal and the particular quiet competence of someone who was not, in any way, in trouble, he thought that was probably the most interesting answer he'd ever received. He stayed another 20 minutes. Then he went back to his room and slept better than he had in weeks. Harrison arrived at the armory at 05:45. He wanted to be there before formation. He wanted to walk in and find the mess, the incomplete work, the components in the wrong order, the half-maintained weapons shoved back in their racks, and have something concrete and official to point to. He'd done this before with other people. Not often, but enough times to know how it generally went. He pushed the door open and stopped. Every weapon was back in its rack. Every cleaning kit was stored and closed. The floor was clean. On the armory table was a 3-page handwritten inspection report, organized by weapon type and serial number, with observed defects, maintenance discrepancies, and recommended actions noted for each. At the top of the report, underlined twice, weapons requiring immediate command review, 7 rifles, 2 machine guns, all with the same maintenance signature in the log, all from the same series of training deployments. Harrison picked up the report. He read the first page, then the second. His jaw tightened. Maya was standing at the end of the rack. She'd been there since he walked in, and she hadn't said anything, and she didn't say anything now. She just looked at him with the same level, unrevealing attention she'd been looking at things with since she arrived. Where did you... He stopped, restarted. Some of these records go back 18 months. I know. You cross-referenced the deployment logs. Yes. He put the report down. You were supposed to clean the weapons. I did clean the weapons. She nodded at the rack. Check any one of them. He didn't move for a moment. He was recalibrating something. She could see it in the way he was standing, the subtle rearrangement of a man who came in expecting one situation and found a different one entirely. The weapons with the flagged records, he said. What are you saying? I'm saying the maintenance logs don't match the physical condition of those weapons, and that the discrepancy is consistent across a specific deployment series, and that the authorizing signature on those records is worth looking at. He looked at her. She held his gaze. That's above your pay grade, Lieutenant. Maybe, but it's in the report either way. He picked up the report again, flipped to the third page, looked at the name underlined at the bottom, the authorizing signature for every flagged weapon in the anomalous series. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. He rolled his sleeve down over his left forearm without thinking, the habitual gesture of someone who'd grown up in the military, checking, adjusting, and the motion caught Maya's attention because it was the same side she kept her own sleeve down on, and she looked at his forearm for 1 second before she looked away. Harrison noticed. He looked at her. She had already turned back to the rack, appearing to check one of the weapons she'd replaced. He took a step toward her. Lieutenant? Sergeant? Your sleeve. She looked at him. Roll it up. The room was quiet enough that the ventilation system was audible. Outside, someone called out a distance for first formation. Maya reached down and rolled up her left sleeve. Harrison looked at the symbol on her forearm. The faded tactical trident. Not a tattoo done on a base somewhere. Not a generic military design. The specific insignia of an elite unit that didn't appear in public records. The kind of mark that was earned in programs whose existence was rarely acknowledged and whose graduation rates could be counted in single digits per year. His face went through 3 different things in about 4 seconds. The smile from yesterday was entirely gone. Where did you... My father was assigned to the program, she said. When I was 17, he started teaching me everything he knew. She rolled her sleeve back down. I didn't come here to cause problems, Sergeant Harrison, she said. I came here because there's something wrong in this unit, and I need to find it before it gets people killed. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. The signature on those records, he said. You know what that means. I think I do, yes. If you're wrong, I know what happens if I'm wrong. He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd arrived at Unit 14, there was nothing performative in his expression. No posturing, no calculation, just a man who had been in special operations long enough to recognize the specific weight of what she'd just put on the table. The commander needs to see this, he said. Yes, said Maya. He does. He picked up the inspection report, rolled it once, holding it in one hand. Then he looked at her one more time, with an expression she couldn't entirely read. He walked out of the armory. The door swung closed behind him. Maya stood alone in the cleaned and silent room, with the rain still coming down outside, and the ventilation system humming, and the first light of morning beginning to show through the high window. She pulled her phone from her pocket, pulled up the photograph she'd taken of the flagged maintenance logs. Then she pulled up a second set of photographs, older ones, scanned from documents she'd been carrying for 3 years, and compared a specific signature from the maintenance log against a specific signature from a classified incident report. They matched. She had known they would match before she arrived at Port Sterling. She had known because she had spent 3 years finding every piece of documentation that pointed to this unit, to this administrator, to this specific pattern of manipulation. But knowing a thing and seeing the confirmation of it were different experiences. She looked at the photo for a long moment. Then she put her phone away, straightened her sleeve, and walked out of the armory into the gray Maine morning. Across the base, the first formation was assembling. Commander Nathan Cole was reading a 3-page inspection report, and somewhere in the administrative wing of Naval Special Operations Unit 14, in an office that most people walked past without thinking about it, a person who had spent years hiding in plain sight looked at their email inbox and felt, for reasons they couldn't quite name yet, deeply uneasy. Commander Nathan Cole read the inspection report twice. The first time he read it standing up, leaning against the edge of his desk with his coffee going cold again on the windowsill behind him. He got to the bottom of the second page before he sat down. He read it the second time with his elbows on the desk and his reading glasses on, which he only used when he needed to be sure he wasn't misreading something. He wasn't misreading anything. He put the report face down on the desk and looked at the wall for a moment. Then he picked up his radio. "Barker, get me the Armory deployment logs for the last 18 months. Physical copies. And find Lieutenant Bennett. Tell her my office, 0800. He set the radio down and looked at the report again without picking it up. The name at the bottom of the flagged signature lines was someone he'd worked alongside for 6 years. He sat with that for longer than he wanted to admit. Maya arrived at Cole's office at 0758. She'd showered, changed into a fresh uniform, and eaten half a protein bar in the corridor outside the mess because the mess itself was full of people who would look at her in ways she didn't have the energy for this morning. 2 hours of sleep. She'd had worse. Cole's aide, Barker, a compact, watchful corporal who looked like he'd been born in a starched uniform, showed her in without making conversation. Cole was standing at the window when she entered. He turned when she closed the door behind her. He looked older in person than he'd seemed from a distance. Not fragile, nothing about the man suggested fragility, but worn in the specific way of someone who had been running on obligation for a long time. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He came around the desk and took his chair but didn't immediately speak. He was doing what she'd done in the car yesterday, taking a moment, assessing. She let him. "You've been here 36 hours, he said. "Yes, sir." "In that time, you've completed an unauthorized cross-reference of our Armory maintenance records against deployment logs and produced an inspection report flagging 9 weapons with documentation anomalies." He picked up the report but didn't open it. "And somehow you also passed every station on the physical assessment yesterday." "I passed most stations," she said. 2 of the timed events I do differently with more sleep." He looked at her over the report. "Is that supposed to make me feel better about any of this?" "No, sir. It's just accurate." Cole set the report down. He opened a drawer and pulled out the single-page transfer file, her file, and put it on the desk between them like he was laying down a card. "I've been in this position for 9 years, he said. "I have never received a transfer file this thin. Never." He tapped it once. "Your file has been scrubbed, and someone with significant clearance level did the scrubbing." She didn't confirm or deny that. She held his gaze. "The program insignia on your arm," he said. "The trident." A pause. "Harrison told me," Cole said. "He came in here 20 minutes before you and told me." "Which is not nothing, coming from Harrison." He folded his hands on the desk. "That program hasn't had an active class in 4 years, and its roster is sealed, so I can't verify you." "I know. That bothers me." "I understand that." "Does it bother you?" She looked at him steadily. "What bothers me is the name on those maintenance logs, and the pattern of what got checked out and when. And the fact that 2 of the missions in that deployment series had equipment failures that were attributed to hostile action when the post-mission records show the weapons were already compromised before they went out." Cole went very still. "I've read those after-action reports," he said slowly. "I know you have." "They were classified." "Yes." He sat back. The chair creaked. Outside the window, the rain had slowed to a gray drizzle, and first formation was audible from the parade ground. Roll call, the flat cadence of a sergeant counting off names. "Who are you?" Cole said. Not accusatory, almost quiet. Maya reached into the inside pocket of her jacket and put a photograph on the desk. It was old, printed on actual photographic paper, not a phone screen, the colors slightly warm in the way of photographs from 20 years ago. A soldier in field gear standing in an unidentifiable outdoor location, arm around the shoulders of a girl of maybe 7 or 8, who was squinting into the sun and holding something that might have been a field manual. Cole leaned forward. He looked at the photograph for a long time. His expression changed in a way she hadn't seen yet. A slow, recognition-shaped shift, something moving behind his eyes that had to do with memory rather than calculation. "Daniel Bennett," he said. Her jaw moved slightly. "That was all?" "I knew your father," Cole said. "I know you did." He looked up from the photograph. "How long have you known I was here?" "Long enough." He rubbed his face with both hands. It was the first gesture she'd seen from him that felt unconstructed, unguarded. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Maya," he said, which was the first time he'd used her given name, and she noticed it. "Sir, what do you need from me?" What she needed was access. Not immediately, and not to everything. She wasn't in a position to ask for that, and she knew it would take time to build enough credibility with Cole that he'd open the full operational archive. But she needed him to not close the door on the maintenance report. She needed him to start asking questions without tipping off the person who would see those questions coming. Cole gave her two things that morning. The first was a full unit assignment, not the administrative holding pattern that new transfers usually sat in for their first 2 weeks, but an actual operational slot, which meant she'd be attending briefings, participating in readiness evaluations, and moving through the facility with the access that came from being a functioning part of the team rather than a guest. The second thing he gave her was harder to quantify. He looked at her across the desk after she'd told him enough. Not everything, but enough. And he said, "I should have asked more questions 12 years ago." She didn't respond to that. She wasn't there to give him absolution. That wasn't why she'd come. But she heard it, and she filed it, and she understood that he was going to help her. The unit's opinion of her did not change overnight. That wasn't something that happened quickly, and Maya didn't expect it to or try to engineer it. What changed was subtler, a recalibration of the kind of attention people paid to her. Where yesterday she'd been background noise, a new body to be assessed and filed, she was now a mild disturbance in the ecosystem. The inspection report had circulated. People knew about it without formally knowing about it, the way information moved in small closed communities. Not announced, not posted, just absorbed through proximity and conversation, and the particular way Sergeant Harrison wasn't making jokes anymore. The training schedule for her second day was a tactical communications exercise. Radio protocol, relay structure, a simulated field scenario where each team member was assigned a role and had to maintain contact through a set of increasingly complicated interruptions. Noise interference, call sign confusion, deliberate misinformation fed into the channel by the exercise controller. Maya was assigned as relay operator, which was a middle function role that required less initiative than either the primary communicator or the field teams, but more sustained attention than most people gave it credit for. The exercise controller was a staff sergeant named Delara Vasquez, small and precise and clearly someone who had designed the exercise to have more failure points than people expected. She ran the simulation from a central station with a headset and a laptop and the expression of someone who found genuine pleasure in watching things go wrong for others. The scenario was a perimeter breach alert, simulated hostiles at the north and east entry points, primary team moving to intercept, 2 support teams holding interior positions, relay keeping communication coherent between all parties. 3 minutes into the exercise, the primary channel went to static. This was deliberate, and everyone knew it was deliberate, but knowing a disruption is coming and managing it cleanly were different skills. The team on the north perimeter started talking over each other. Maya could hear 3 voices simultaneously, one reading grid coordinates, one calling a status update, one repeating a call sign waiting for acknowledgement. She had maybe 4 seconds before the relay log fell behind and lost coherence. She made a decision and keyed her radio. "North team, hold." Her voice was flat and even. "Call sign confirmation. Lead, go." A pause. Then the North team lead, a corporal named Whitmore, who'd been with the unit for 2 years. "North lead, Whitmore, grid 9-4 confirmed. Copy 9-4, status? 2 positions holding. No contact. East team, your turn. Status. East team lead, east holding. Movement at the fence line, no confirmed hostile requesting. Hold visual, do not engage, confirm to relay every 60 seconds. Copy? Copy. She had the relay log caught up in 90 seconds. Vasquez, at the central station, made a small notation on her tablet. The kind of notation that didn't look like anything, but was the specific gesture of someone adjusting their expectations. After the exercise, when the teams were debriefing in the main corridor, Evan Brooks fell in beside her. "You've run relay before," he said. "Some. That was the way you cut off the crossover. Nobody does that fast." She shrugged one shoulder. "You lose the log, you lose the operation. That's the only real rule. Where'd you learn radio protocol?" She didn't answer for a beat. Same place I learned everything else. He nodded like that was an answer, because at this point he'd started to understand that with Maya Bennett, the pauses were part of the answer. The pauses were, Harrison didn't come at her directly after the armory incident. She'd expected some version of retaliation, not physical, nothing that crude, but the kind of institutional friction that experienced NCOs could apply when they wanted to make a new officer's life difficult without leaving fingerprints. Paperwork that went to the wrong queue, briefing schedules that didn't include her, a particular kind of cooperative non-cooperation that wore people down slowly. What she got instead was something more interesting. Harrison started watching her, not in the hostile way he'd watched her that first day, the flat assessment of someone who'd already made up their mind. This was different, quieter, more careful. He was trying to figure out what she was actually doing. She could tell because he was good enough at surveillance to be subtle about it, and she was good enough at noticing surveillance to catch it anyway. On the third day, he fell in beside her at the range. She was running a drill sequence, 10-meter draw and fire, target transitions, reload under movement. And she heard him come up on her right side and stop, and she finished the string before she lowered her weapon and turned to him. Your grip on the transition, he said. She looked at him. You drop your support hand between targets, he said. Just a fraction. It's costing you about a quarter second per transition. She turned back to the target, brought the weapon up, ran 3 transitions, consciously holding the support hand position. The groups were tighter. Yeah, she said. Your father teach you that draw? The draw, yeah. The transitions I picked up later. Where? She ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, set the weapon on the bench. Different places. Harrison was quiet for a moment. He was looking at the target, not at her. The maintenance report, he said. Cole's looking into it. I know. Quietly. That's the right way to do it. He turned to her slightly. The person whose signature is on those records. They've been in this unit for 6 years. They have relationships. If this goes sideways, if you're wrong, or if it can't be proven, I'm not wrong. If the documentation isn't there. It's there. He held her gaze. There was something in his expression that was close to frustrated and also close to something that wasn't quite respect yet, but was angled toward it. You knew before you got here, he said. Not a question. I've been building documentation for 3 years, she said. What's in this unit's records is the last piece, the piece I needed a reason to access. You got yourself transferred here on purpose. She looked at him. He stopped. Recalibrated. How? Paperwork goes through people, she said. People have supervisors. Supervisors have priorities. If you understand the system well enough, you can apply pressure to specific points and get a predictable result. Reassignment branch. Yes. He exhaled through his nose. It might have been a laugh, or it might have been disbelief. The two were close enough in this context that she couldn't tell the difference. The armory, he said. I needed access to the physical records, the deployment logs, the maintenance documentation that hadn't been digitized yet. She glanced at him. You gave me the best possible reason to spend 12 hours in there without anyone asking why. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. I threw that rifle at your feet, he said. You dropped it. I dropped it on purpose. I know. He looked at her, and there was something on his face that she recognized because she'd seen it before in places like this. The particular expression of a man processing the gap between who he'd thought he was dealing with and who he was actually dealing with. I had you figured for a desk officer who pulled strings to get a field assignment, he said. I know. I was a complete ass to you. You were, yeah. A beat. I'm sorry, he said. It came out flat and direct, the way men like Harrison apologized when they meant it. No decoration, no cushioning, just the words. She nodded. Okay. That's it? Okay. Would you prefer a longer response? He stopped, shook his head. No. She picked up her weapon and checked the chamber again, the habitual double check that her father had drilled into her before she was 10 years old. Harrison, she said. Yeah. I'm going to need your help with something. He looked at her. The next stage of what I'm doing, she said. I can't do it from inside the command structure. I need someone who knows this unit, the people, the schedules, the relationships, and who I can actually trust. He was quiet for a moment. The range was empty this time of day, just the two of them, and the ventilation fans and the targets hanging still at the end of their lanes. "You sure you want that to be me?" he said, "given how we started." "You saw the same name I did on those records," she said, "and you went to Cole with the report instead of sitting on it or making it disappear. That tells me something." He crossed his arms, looked at the targets. "What do you need?" he said. "Well, the name on the maintenance logs was Carla Sutton, administrator, operations support, 6 years with Unit 14. She managed scheduling, deployment documentation, personnel records, and the flow of information between the unit's operational arm and the naval command structure above it. She was 43, precise in her work, unremarkable in her presence. The kind of person a unit like this depended on without thinking about it. The way you depended on load-bearing walls without registering that they were the reason the building was standing. Maya had known her name for 2 years. She'd come across it in the fringe documentation of her father's case, not in the primary records, which had been cleaned thoroughly enough that 3 different investigators had hit dead ends on them, but in the secondary material, the administrative trail that people overlooked because administrators were overlooked, the scheduling records that showed when certain personnel had been moved into or out of positions, the information access logs from a naval archive that had been partially digitized and then, for reasons the archivist couldn't explain, partially reclassified. Sutton's name appeared in those peripheral records 11 times over a 3-year window. Not flagged, not emphasized, just there, in the background, the way a person could be in the background of a photograph without being the subject. Maya had been careful not to look at her. That was important. If Sutton was monitoring her own exposure, and Maya had to assume she was, because someone who'd operated this carefully for this long was monitoring their exposure, any direct attention from a new transfer would register as a threat and trigger a defensive response. So Maya had spent 4 days at Unit 14 without once walking past Sutton's office, without looking in her direction in the mess, without including her name in any conversation. But she had watched her, the way she watched the exits and the cameras on her first day. Peripheral. Systematic. Recording without appearing to record. Sutton arrived at her office at 0810 every morning, 12 minutes after the command staff meeting concluded, which meant she was getting a brief from someone who attended those meetings. She took her breaks at the same time every day, 11:40 and 15:30, and she walked the same route each time, to the East Building, the vending machines, back. Her computer faced the window, which meant anyone walking past could see her screen, which most people would read as openness, and which Maya read as positioning that invited surveillance without enabling it. She wore the same 2 watches, one on each wrist. Maya had noticed that on day 2 and filed it without knowing yet what it meant. On the evening of day 4, she was in the common room going through her notes. Not the operational notes, the personal ones, the 3-year accumulation of fragments and threads, and marginal observations that she kept in a format that looked like a personal journal if anyone picked it up. When Evan Brooks sat down across from her with 2 cups of coffee and put one in front of her without being asked, she looked at the coffee. "You look like you've had about 4 hours of sleep in the last 2 days, he said. "5, she said, splitting hairs. She picked up the coffee. It was too strong, which was fine. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Probably." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. He had the manner of someone who was curious in a way that ran deeper than small talk. He asked questions the way people ask questions when they actually wanted the answer. "The day you arrived," he said, "before formation, someone on your floor said they saw you walking the perimeter of the base at about 05:30, before anyone else was up." She didn't confirm or deny. "That's a long time to be up before formation," he said, "and you already looked like you knew where everything was." "I studied the layout before I arrived." "From what?" She looked at him. He raised his hand slightly. I'm just trying to understand who you are, which I realize is something you've been specifically not telling people." "Yes." "Is there a reason?" "Yes." He sat back, wrapped both hands around his cup. "Okay," he said. "Fair enough." He looked out the window for a moment. The rain again, always the rain here, coming off the inlet in low gray sheets. "Can I tell you what I think?" "Go ahead." "I think you're not here because you were transferred," he said. "I think you're here because you went somewhere, and this is the place you ended up, and whatever it is you're looking for, you think it's here." She looked at him across the table. He was 24 years old, 8 months in, still not entirely sure he belonged here, and he'd just landed closer to the truth than most people twice his age would have. "Why are you still here?" she said. He blinked. "What?" "Unit 14. 8 months, and you don't fully believe you belong here. I can tell. So why are you still here?" He was quiet for a moment. Something shifted in his face, the careful look of someone deciding how honestly to answer. "Because I don't leave things," he said. "When I start something, He stopped. "My dad was the same way. He had this thing he used to say, you don't walk away from the thing you came to do, even when it's hard, even when you're not sure you're the right person for it." Something moved in Maya's chest, quiet, unwanted. "Your dad military?" she said. "He was a firefighter, died in the line of service when I was 16. He said it simply, the way people said things they'd had years to settle with." She nodded. "He was a good man," Evan said. "A really decent man." He looked at his coffee. "I don't know if that's enough of a reason to do something, but it's the one I have." The common room was quiet around them. Someone in the corridor was talking, voice low, words indistinct. Maya set down her coffee. "Go get some sleep, Brooks," she said. "You should too." "I will." He stood up, picked up his cup, paused at the edge of the table. "Whatever you're looking for," he said, "I hope you find it." He walked out. Maya sat alone with her notes and her cold coffee and the rain against the window. She looked down at the page in front of her, the last line she'd written, in the cramped shorthand she'd been using since she was 17. Sutton, 2 watches. Left wrist, unit standard. Right wrist, different time zone. She looked at that line for a long time. Then she wrote one more word beneath it. Why? On the morning of day 5, something changed in the unit's rhythm. It wasn't obvious. It was the kind of change that only registered if you were already paying attention to baseline. The particular frequency of a system running normally versus a system that has received a signal it's trying to process. Cole had called a command staff meeting that wasn't on the regular schedule. 40 minutes, closed door, only the senior element. Maya wasn't in the room, but she was in the adjacent corridor, and she heard the meeting end 17 minutes before it was supposed to. Doors opening, footsteps with the specific cadence of people moving with purpose rather than habit. Harrison found her an hour later at the equipment cage. "There's a mission package," he said. She looked at him. "Came in overnight, classified source. It's got priority flag. Command wants a full readiness evaluation by end of week." He paused. "It's a joint operation. Naval and federal asset coordination." She waited. "Cole showed me the source documentation," Harrison said. His voice was level, but there was something underneath it. The intelligence origin, the target parameters, the timeline. "And?" He looked at her. "It looks exactly like your father's last mission," he said. The equipment cage was quiet around them, metal shelving and sealed cases and the hum of the climate control system. Maya's expression didn't break. That was something she'd learned, the hard way, over 3 years of following a thread that kept leading into darker territory. How to hold the weight of information without letting it land on your face. But her hand, resting on the edge of the metal shelf, tightened once. Harrison saw it. "Same structure," he said quietly. "Same type of target. Same joint authorization chain," he paused. "Same intelligence source designator." She looked at him directly. "The designator that was used in your father's mission file," he said. "The one that was supposed to be a vetted federal asset but turned out to be compromised," she said. "Yeah." They stood in the equipment cage and the climate system hummed, and somewhere outside a vehicle was reversing across the gravel lot, the backup alarm a thin mechanical pulse. "Someone's running the same play," Maya said. "Looks like it. Using a dead asset designator that should have been burned 12 years ago. Which means either someone inside federal oversight never actually burned it," Harrison said, "or someone in this unit has access to legacy intelligence designators and is using one to fabricate a source." She turned it over, looking at it from every angle the way she looked at every piece of information, testing for weight, for structural integrity, for the places where it might crack. "The mission timeline," she said. "How tight?" "End of week for evaluation. They're talking about a deployment window opening in 9 days. 9 days. "Cole," she said. "He's concerned," Harrison said. But he's also got 12 operators who are ready to move and a mission package with a federal priority flag that he can't just sit on without justification. I can give him justification. The maintenance records alone aren't enough. I know. She looked past him, at the row of cases along the far wall, at something that wasn't in the room. I need to get into the archive. The operational archive. The pre-digitization records. The physical files from the period covering my father's mission. Sutton manages access to that archive. Harrison went still. You need something from a room controlled by the person you think is running this operation, he said. Yes. I know what it is. He exhaled, looked at the ceiling briefly, the gesture of a man adding up numbers and not loving the total. How? He said. I need a reason to be in the administrative wing, she said. A legitimate one that Sutton would expect and not flag. That's harder than it sounds. She notices everything. I know she does. Maya looked at him, which is why the reason needs to come from you. He was quiet. You have a standing maintenance review that you do quarterly, she said. It's in your schedule. Armory records, equipment logs, cross-referenced against the physical inventory. You've signed off on it 3 times since Sutton's been managing the archive access. 4 times, he said. Put it on the schedule for this week. Bring me as the new unit armament officer reviewing the process. She held his gaze. Sutton will see the scheduling request. She'll see its routine. She won't flag it. And when we're in there, I'll find what I need. He looked at her for a long time, not calculating exactly. More like he was seeing her clearly for the first time and adjusting to what that meant. You've been running this the whole time, he said, since you walked in the door. I've been trying to, she said. Some of it improvised. Which parts? She almost smiled. The armory. You gave me that one. I wouldn't have designed it that way. But you used it. I used it. He shook his head, and it wasn't dismissal. It was something between rueful and impressed, the reaction of someone who'd been on the wrong side of a play and could still recognize the quality of the play. Schedule goes in today, he said. Reviews the day after tomorrow. That works? He turned to go, then stopped. Maya. She looked at him. If Sutton is what you think she is, he said, and if this mission package is what I think it is. He paused. We are 9 days from something very bad happening to people I've served with for years. She held his gaze. I know, she said. He nodded. Walked out of the equipment cage. Maya stayed another moment, alone in the quiet hum of the room, running the next 48 hours through her head, every step, every contingency, every place the plan could break apart. She found 4 of them before she got to the end. That was fine. 4 was manageable. What she found when she went back to the beginning and ran it again, the thing she hadn't anticipated, the variable she hadn't accounted for, was the way Sutton had looked at her that morning across the mess hall. Not at her directly. Past her. The way someone looked at a reflection, as if she already knew. That look stayed with Maya longer than she wanted it to. Not because it frightened her. Fear was a different sensation, something colder and more immediate. This was more like the feeling of a calculation shifting. Like running a set of numbers and getting a result that was technically possible but that you hadn't planned for. She went back to her room that evening and sat on the edge of the metal-framed bed and thought about it for 40 minutes without moving. Sutton had looked past her, not at her. The distinction mattered. Looking at someone was an act of attention. Looking past someone was an act of measurement. The kind of peripheral assessment you performed on something you'd already categorized and were now monitoring. Which meant one of 2 things. Either Sutton was generally hyper-aware of everyone who moved through the unit's space, which was possible and consistent with someone who'd been running a long-term deception inside a closed community, or she'd already identified Maya specifically as something worth monitoring. The question was when. Maya thought about the timing. Day 1, the transfer file, the registration, the gate log. Day 2, the armory, which had produced a report that went to Cole. Day 3, the communications exercise, the range session. Day 4, the common room, the conversation with Brooks. At which point in that sequence had she become visible to Sutton? The armory report was the obvious answer. If Sutton was monitoring anything related to the flagged maintenance records, a new officer producing an inspection report that highlighted those specific weapons within 36 hours of arrival would have registered immediately. which meant Sutton had been watching her since day 2, which meant she'd had 3 days to assess Maya, run her own research, and decide what Maya represented. Maya stood up from the bed, walked to the window, and looked out at the dark inlet. The water was black and flat this time of night, the tree line a solid shadow on the far side. No stars. The cloud cover was complete. She thought about the 9 days. Then she went to the desk and opened her personal notebook and wrote for 2 hours. The administrative wing was a different climate from the rest of the base. Warmer, better lit. The floors were polished linoleum instead of the scuffed rubber of the operational buildings, and the overhead fluorescents had been replaced with recessed panel lighting that made the space feel almost corporate. It was the kind of environment that attracted a certain type of personality, people who were comfortable with indirect power, with the management of information rather than the application of force. Harrison had submitted the maintenance review scheduling request the evening before. Routine format, standard authorizing reference, his name and one additional reviewer, Lt. Bennett, new armament officer, familiarization review. They arrived at the administrative wing at 0930. Sutton's office was at the far end of the corridor, glass-fronted, door open. Maya registered it in her peripheral field as they passed. Sutton at her desk, head down over something, not looking up. The archive access room was midway down the corridor. Harrison badged them in. The room was larger than it looked from outside. A deep space with metal shelving units running floor to ceiling on both long walls and a center table with reading lamps and document trays. The pre-digitization records were on the right side, organized by fiscal year and operational series designation. The more recent material was on the left, redundant physical copies of what had already been entered into the digital system. Review format's pretty standard, Harrison said, at normal volume. Not performing normalcy, just maintaining it. We cross-reference the physical against the digital log, flag any discrepancies, sign off on the reconciliation sheet. Got it, Maya said. She went to the right side shelving and started with the current fiscal year, working backward. She moved at a pace that looked methodical and administrative, pulling binders, checking spines, making notes on her review sheet. She was building a visual pattern of herself that was completely legible and completely boring. Harrison worked the left side. For 12 minutes, nothing happened. Then Maya heard footsteps in the corridor. Not heavy, light, precise, the particular gait of someone who moved with calibrated efficiency. The footsteps stopped outside the archive room. She didn't look up. The door opened. Harrison? Sutton's voice was measured. Mid-range, professional, the tone of someone who'd spent years communicating information to people above her pay grade without appearing to reach above it. I didn't know you had the quarterly review today. It was on the schedule, Harrison said. Went in yesterday. I didn't see it come through. Might have gone to Barker's queue instead of yours. New routing update, I think. A pause. Maya kept her eyes on the binder in front of her. And the new lieutenant? Sutton said. Bennett, new armament officer. She's doing a familiarization review. Gets a look at how we reconcile physical against digital. Standard onboarding for the role. Another pause. Longer this time. Lieutenant Bennett. Sutton said it the way you said a name when you were placing it, confirming a position on a mental map. Maya looked up. Sutton was standing in the doorway, one hand on the frame. She was a compact woman, dark-haired, with the kind of face that read as pleasant without being warm. A professional expression, precisely calibrated for a professional environment. She was wearing a dark blazer over her uniform, which nobody else in the unit did, and the 2 watches were on both wrists. Maya could now see the second one clearly. The right wristwatch was analog, older model, the kind of watch that required manual winding. Ma'am, Maya said. Sutton looked at her for exactly as long as was normal for an introduction. No longer, no shorter. Welcome to Unit 14, she said. Thank you. Sutton looked at the binder on the table in front of Maya, then at the shelf Maya had been working through. What section are you on? She said. Current fiscal year, operational series, working backward. The pre-digitization material's on the right wall, past 24 months. I see it. I'll get there. Sutton looked at her for one more second, just one. Let me know if you need anything, she said. She walked away down the corridor. Her footsteps were the same rhythm going away as coming toward. Even, controlled, unhurried. Harrison waited until the footsteps faded. He glanced at Maya. She held up 3 fingers, then pointed at the floor. 3 minutes. Stay where we are. He went back to his work. Maya counted. At 3 minutes and 20 seconds, she moved to the right side shelving, the pre-digitization section. She worked through the fiscal years methodically, current, previous, the year before that, until she reached the operational year that contained her father's mission deployment window. The binders for that year were thicker. More operations, more documentation. She pulled the first one and set it on the table and opened it. The main content was standard: operation designations, personnel rosters, equipment manifests, communication logs. She scanned without touching anything she didn't need to touch, moving through the pages at a pace that was fast enough to be efficient and slow enough to look like she was reading. She found the intelligence source documentation in the fourth binder. The source designator was a 6-character alphanumeric code, and she recognized the format immediately because she had it memorized. She had memorized it 3 years ago from a fragment of documentation she'd obtained through means that she wasn't going to think about in this room. The code in the binder matched. She stood looking at it. On the page below the source designator was the authorization chain, the sequence of signatures that had validated the intelligence and approved the mission based on it. 5 signatures in total. She recognized the first 3 from the public record of the incident. The fourth was a federal oversight stamp that had been the subject of 3 separate failed investigations. The 5th signature was new. It was small, positioned below the federal stamp as a secondary administrative authorization, the kind of signature that processed the documentation through the unit's internal filing system rather than the command chain. The kind of signature that nobody looked at because it was paperwork, not decision-making. She'd seen that signature before. She looked at it for exactly as long as she needed to look at it. Then she closed the binder, returned it to the shelf in the correct position, and went back to the section she'd been working through before Sutton walked in. Harrison looked at her when she passed him. She didn't change her expression, but she pressed her thumbnail into the center of her palm twice. The field signal they'd established 2 days ago, the one that meant, got it. Harrison went back to his binder. They finished the review at 11:20, signed the reconciliation sheet, and walked out of the administrative wing into the gray morning air. They didn't speak until they were past the vehicle lot and into the tree line on the eastern edge of the base perimeter, where the cameras didn't cover. "Well," Harrison said. "She signed off on the original intelligence authorization," Maya said. "Not the command chain, below it. Administrative processing, the kind of step that looks like a clerk stamping a form. But the source designator that was used to validate the mission intelligence. The federal asset code. It ran through her filing signature before it went up the command chain." Maya looked at the tree line. She didn't just facilitate the operation. She was the authentication point for the source. If the source was fabricated, if someone was feeding false intelligence through that designator, they needed a person inside the unit to process it without flagging it. Harrison was quiet. She was 28 years old at the time, Maya said, 3 years into her administrative position. New enough to look like she was just doing her job, senior enough to have the access. "How did you get access to the original mission files?" "I didn't, not until today." She looked at him. "I had the source designator from a fragment of document I obtained through a contact at Naval Archive. I didn't have the unit-side authentication chain. I knew there had to be an internal authorization point, and I knew it would be someone in administrative operations, but I didn't have the name. Until now. Until now." Harrison exhaled. It was a slow, controlled sound. The breath of a man who just added something heavy to an already heavy load. Something heavy to an already heavy load. "Cole," he said. "We need to go to Cole," she confirmed. "Today, with everything. The mission package is still active, 9 days. 8 now." He looked at her. "We moved today," she said. Cole's office at 1200 was the 4 of them. Cole, Harrison, Maya, and Corporal Barker, who was there because Cole trusted him and because someone needed to manage the door. Maya laid it out in order, the maintenance records and the flagged signatures. The archive authorization chain and Sutton's administrative stamp on the original mission source. The new mission package and its source designator, which matched the format of the original compromise code within a variance range that was too small to be coincidental. She put the photographs on the desk one by one as she talked. She talked for 14 minutes without stopping. She'd done this before, the presentation of accumulated evidence. And she'd learned that the way you presented it mattered as much as the evidence itself. Not dramatic, not emotional, sequential. One piece, then the next, then the connection between them. When she finished, the room was quiet. Cole looked at the photographs for a long time. Then he looked at the wall. Then he looked at his hands. "She's been here 6 years," he said. "Yes, sir." "I brought her in. I reviewed her record. I approved her position." "Yes, sir." He looked at Maya. "You're telling me she's been running intelligence manipulation through my unit for 6 years. Minimum. I'm telling you the documentation is consistent with that conclusion. I'm telling you the source designator in the new mission package matches the pattern of the compromised source from 12 years ago. And I'm telling you that if you send operators out on that mission, you will be sending them into a situation built on fabricated intelligence. The same way..." She stopped. "The same way my father went out." She didn't say it. It didn't need to be said. Cole's jaw was tight. He looked at Harrison. "You've seen the same documentation," he said. "Everything she's shown you," Harrison said. "Yes, sir." Cole stood up from his desk, which meant the meeting was entering a different phase. He walked to the window, the same window he'd been standing at when she arrived, and stood with his hands behind his back. "I need to notify federal oversight," he said. "Carefully," Maya said. He turned. "If the original compromised source was processed through federal channels," she said, "then there's a possibility the oversight structure has a contaminated element. Whoever fabricated the source designator 12 years ago and is now using it again, they had access to federal authorization formatting. They may still have access to federal channels." "Are you saying I can't trust federal oversight?" "I'm saying I don't know which parts of it you can trust. And until you do, notifying through standard channels risks alerting whoever is coordinating with Sutton." Cole absorbed this. "Who do you trust?" he said. "Outside this room?" She paused. "One person. Naval Criminal Investigative Service. A senior agent named Petra Walsh. She ran a parallel investigation into my father's case 3 years ago, came up empty through official channels, and gave me a contact protocol to use if I ever found something solid enough to reopen it. You've been working with NCIS. Not officially. I've been working independently. Walsh gave me a back channel. And you trust her. She spent 11 months on a case that went nowhere and didn't bury what she found. She filed it properly and kept it accessible." Maya met his gaze. "That's not the behavior of someone who's been bought." Cole looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at Harrison again, and Harrison gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Cole walked back to the desk, picked up one of the photographs, the one showing the source designator in the archive binder alongside Sutton's administrative stamp. "How long to get Walsh here?" he said. "If I use the contact protocol, 24 to 36 hours. And in the meantime..." "In the meantime," Maya said, "we need to handle Sutton without her knowing she's being handled." He looked at her. "Explain." "She walked into the archive room this morning while we were reviewing the records. She knows I'm looking at pre-digitization material. She may not know specifically what I found, but she knows I was in proximity to it." Maya kept her voice level. "If she feels the pressure starting, she'll move. She'll destroy the documentation she can get to, and she'll make sure the mission package is accelerated or killed in a way that cuts the evidentiary trail. So I can't pull the mission. Not yet. Not until Walsh is here and we have federal eyes on the documentation. I have to leave a live mission package on the board and not tell my operators it might be a trap." "Yes, sir." The word "sir" felt inadequate for what she was asking him to do. They both knew it. Cole set the photograph down, squared it on the desk with the others. "The operators who would go on this mission," he said. "If it goes wrong..." "It won't go wrong," Maya said, "because we're not going to let it reach deployment." "You're certain?" A beat. "I'm working to make sure," she said. It was the most honest thing she'd said all day, and it cost her something to say it. Cole heard the difference. She could tell by the way he looked at her. Not at what she was presenting, but at her. For a moment, he was seeing her the way Harrison had started to see her, past the architecture of what she was doing, and at the person doing it. He picked up the desk phone. "Barker." Barker appeared in the doorway. "Get me a secure line, and close the outer door." Oh. The contact protocol for Petra Walsh was a number that routed through 2 relay points before connecting, and it only worked from a secure line, and it required a code phrase that Maya had been carrying in her head for 3 years without using it. She made the call from Cole's office at 1340. Walsh picked up on the second ring. Walsh. This is an eightfold contact, Maya said. Authorization Tango 77 Delta. A pause. 3 seconds. Where are you? Walsh said. I can't say on this line. Are you safe? Currently, yes. Do you have documentation? Physical and photographic. Source designator confirmation, unit side authorization chain, maintenance records pattern, and a live mission package with matching source format. Another pause, longer this time. That's enough to reopen, Walsh said. I need you here, not a call, not a relay. Here, 36 hours. I need a location. I'll send a coordinate through the secondary channel in 1 hour. Understood. A beat. Maya. Yeah. Your father's case. If this is what you're saying it is, it is. A third pause. This one felt different. The pause of someone setting something aside so they could focus on what came next. 36 hours, Walsh said. Keep your head down. The line disconnected. Maya handed the phone back to Cole. He looked at her. Now we wait, she said. I'm not good at waiting, he said. Nobody is, she said. Do it anyway. Sutton submitted a documentation amendment request at 1600. It came through the standard administrative queue, flagged as a routine records correction, a maintenance log entry for one of the Armory's support weapons, requesting a date amendment on a prior service record. Standard format. Standard routing. The kind of request that moved through Barker's queue and got processed without much thought. Barker almost processed it automatically. He caught himself, thought about the morning's conversation, and brought it to Cole instead. Cole looked at the amendment request. The weapon serial number being amended was one of the 9 flagged in Maya's inspection report. He put the request face down on his desk and picked up his radio. Bennett. Harrison. My office. They were there in 4 minutes. Maya looked at the amendment request. She read it twice. She's trying to clean the record, Harrison said. She's trying to narrow the evidentiary window, Maya said. If the date on this log entry is amended, the deployment correlation I established in the inspection report becomes less precise. Not gone, but less precise. She set the document down. She knows. Cole looked at her. How certain? Certain enough to start moving. Maya looked at the request again. She's not panicking. This is controlled. She's removing the most exposed piece of documentation first and seeing what happens. What does she do next? Harrison said. Depends on how exposed she thinks she is. If she thinks I only have the maintenance records, she adjusts those and waits to see if anything else moves. Maya's jaw was set. If she thinks I have the archive material, she moves faster. Archive material, Cole said. The source designator. Yes. He was quiet. I need to know if she goes near that archive room tonight, Maya said, without me seeing her go near it. Cole looked at Barker. Barker understood without being told. The security camera at the far end of the administrative corridor, he said. It writes to a local buffer. I can set a flag on access to that wing after hours. Do it, Cole said. And Barker. Sir? Process the amendment request normally. Route it through. Let it go. Barker looked uncertain. Sir, if we let her amend... We have the photograph of the original, Maya said. We have the timestamp on when the photo was taken. Letting her amend the record is fine. It adds to the picture. It shows she knew which records to target and when. Cole nodded. What she does after we let it through is what tells us what she knows. Barker went to process the amendment. The 3 of them stood in Cole's office. Outside, the rain had stopped for the first time in days. Through the window, the inlet was visible in the late afternoon light, flat and steel-colored, and the tree line on the far bank was still, and the whole scene had the particular quiet of a place holding its breath. Walsh will be here tomorrow evening, Maya said. We need to hold the line until then. And if Sutton moves faster than that, Harrison said. Maya looked at the amendment request, face down on the desk. Then we move faster than she does, she said. At 22:30 that night, the security flag on the administrative wing triggered. Someone had badged into the archive access room. Barker pulled the camera feed and had the image on Cole's screen in 4 minutes. It was Carla Sutton. She was wearing civilian clothes, and she was on the phone. Cole looked at the image for a long moment. Then he looked at Maya, who was standing beside him in his office in the dark, and the screen's light was the only light in the room, and her face was completely still. "She's not alone in this," Maya said quietly. "No," Cole said. "Whoever she's calling, that's the other end of the line. The person who needed someone inside this unit 12 years ago and still needs someone inside it now." He looked at her. "We just ran out of 36 hours, she said. Cole picked up his radio. "Barker, lock the administrative wing. Full security hold, nobody in or out." He paused. "And get me every operator on base. Full muster, right now." Static, then Barker's voice slipped and immediate, "Copy, Commander." Cole set the radio down. He looked at Maya. "Tell me what to do next," he said. And for the first time since she arrived at Port Sterling in the rain with a one-page transfer file and a rifle at her feet, Maya Bennett told a commander exactly what she needed him to hear. What she told him took 11 minutes. She laid it out the way she'd been building it for 3 years. Not as a theory, not as a suspicion, but as an operational sequence. Who did what, in what order, through what channels, with what result. She told him about the fabricated source designator and how it had been used to validate intelligence that sent a 12-man team into a compromised position. She told him about the administrative authentication chain and why Sutton's signature at the bottom of the processing document was not coincidental but structural. The operation couldn't have moved forward without someone inside the unit vouching for the source through the filing system, creating a paper trail that looked institutional and was anything but. She told him that her father had been the team leader on that mission. She told him that he'd survived the initial contact, but that the after-action report had been written in a way that placed operational failure on his decisions rather than on the intelligence he'd been given to work with. She told him that Daniel Bennett had spent the last 12 years carrying a reputation built on a document that had been deliberately constructed to protect the people who'd actually made the decisions that got men hurt. Cole listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he didn't say anything for a moment. He was looking at the camera feed image still up on his screen. Sutton in the archive room, phone to her ear, civilian clothes, 22:30 at night. "How many people knew your father?" he said finally. "In what sense?" "Knew him well enough to know he'd take the blame rather than fight it." Maya looked at the image. "That's the question, isn't it?" she said. Cole picked up his radio again. "All units, this is Commander Cole. Full muster, Building 1, 10 minutes. This is not a drill." 23 operators assembled in Building 1's main briefing space in under 9 minutes. They came in various states of off-duty, some in PT gear, some in civvies, a few who'd clearly been asleep and were still shaking it off. Evan Brooks was near the back, alert in the way he got when something in the unit's rhythm was off. He'd felt the shift hours ago and hadn't been able to sleep because of it. Cole stood at the front of the room. Harrison stood to Cole's left. Maya stood to Cole's right, which placed her in a position that the assembled operators noticed immediately. She was not beside the commander in a support role. She was beside him in a peer role, and the positioning said something that the room registered even before anyone spoke. 12 hours ago, Cole said, without preamble, I received documentation that indicates the mission package currently on our board is built on compromised intelligence. He paused to let that land. Not a planning error, not bad source judgment, deliberately compromised by a person operating inside this unit. The room went through several things at once, a collective intake, a ripple of exchanged looks, then a very specific kind of silence. The silence of people who had heard something they needed to finish processing before they could react to it. I'm not going to walk you through the full evidentiary picture tonight, Cole continued. NCIS will be on site tomorrow. What I need from you right now is operational discipline and your physical presence in this building until I tell you otherwise. Someone near the front, a staff sergeant named Okereke, who'd been in the unit for 7 years, raised his hand. Sir, the person operating inside the unit. Identified, Cole said. Are they on base? Currently being contained. Okereke lowered his hand. The room absorbed this. The mission package, another voice said from the middle of the group. What happens to it? It's suspended pending the NCIS review. Cole looked around the room. Any operator who has had contact with the mission documentation in the last 72 hours needs to see Barker before they sleep tonight. That's not optional. He looked at Harrison, who stepped forward and started organizing the documentation process. Cole turned to Maya. The archive room, he said quietly. She was on the phone. Yes. To who? I don't know yet, but the call was outbound, which means she initiated it, which means she was reporting, not receiving instructions. She felt the pressure starting, and she called up the chain. Can Walsh trace it? Walsh can request a trace through NCIS channels, yes, but that takes time and it requires the other end to still be accessible. Maya looked at the screen. Whoever she called is going to do one of two things. Either they go to ground immediately and we lose the trace, or they try to accelerate the operation before Walsh gets here and we lose the window. What's the most likely? Accelerate, Maya said. Because going to ground costs them the mission, and the mission is the point. Whatever this operation was designed to accomplish, they've been working toward it long enough that cutting and running isn't the first choice. Cole was quiet. They're going to try to push the deployment forward, Maya said, before NCIS arrives. They'll use whatever leverage they have on the authorization chain to move the timeline up. They'd need command authorization to move a deployment. She looked at him. He understood. They're going to try to come through me, he said. Yes, sir. Through official channel, probably federal. Pressure from above your position to execute the mission on an accelerated timeline. It'll look like urgency. It'll be framed as a national security necessity. And if I refuse to execute, they'll try to go around you. She met his gaze. Which is actually what we want. Because going around a unit commander to push a compromised operation is a documented federal offense. And if Walsh is already in position when that pressure comes down, she can catch it in real time. Cole looked at her for a moment with an expression that was hard to read because it contained too many things at once. You planned for this contingency, he said. I planned for several contingencies. This one specifically. When I saw Sutton on that camera feed, yes, this became the most likely path. He turned back to the room where Harrison was efficiently working through the operator documentation process. Organized chaos, controlled, and purposeful. There's something I need to know, Cole said. Sir? Your father. He kept his voice low enough that it didn't carry. 12 years ago, the after-action report. The one that put the operational failure on him. She waited. I co-signed that report, Cole said. The room noise around them was enough that nobody heard it. Maya had known this. She'd known it for 2 years, from the partial document fragment that had led her to Walsh's case file, which had led her to Unit 14. She'd known Cole's signature was on the document that had defined and constrained the last 12 years of her father's life. She'd also known, from Walsh's investigative notes, that Cole had co-signed it under pressure from the federal oversight chain, that he'd been told the report was the final word from a level above him, and that his signature was a formality, that he'd signed it because he didn't know enough to refuse, and because the person who'd told him to sign it was someone he'd trusted. She'd known all of this. But knowing a thing and standing in a room with the man who signed the document were different. I know, she said. He looked at her. I know you co-signed it, she said. I know the circumstances under which you signed it. Does your father know? A pause. My father, she said carefully, knows that the report wasn't accurate. He doesn't know all the specific people involved and how it got written. She looked at Cole steadily. He spent 12 years knowing he didn't make the decision that the report said he made, and spending the rest of his time trying to stay functional while carrying a thing that nobody would officially acknowledge. Cole absorbed this. Where is he? He said. Portland, she said. He retired from service 8 years ago. He works maintenance at a high school. A beat. He teaches the kids on the track team how to run intervals on his lunch breaks. Cole closed his eyes for 1 second. Just one. I should have asked more questions, he said. The same thing he'd said in his office on day 4, but it landed differently now, in this context, with this weight. Yes, she said. You should have. He opened his eyes, took a breath. What do you need from me? He said, for the second time since they'd started working together. But it meant something different now than it had the first time. Everything you have, she said. They moved Sutton to the base's secure holding facility at midnight. Not an arrest. They didn't have federal authority to arrest, and until Walsh arrived, they were operating in a gray zone that required careful positioning. What Cole had authority to do was remove an administrative staff member from their position and place them in supervised containment pending a security review. He had that authority under the unit's internal security protocols, and he exercised it in writing, signed, and time-stamped. Sutton didn't argue. That was the thing that Maya noticed most. Not the expression on Sutton's face when the two security personnel appeared at the archive room door, not the precise and controlled way she ended the phone call and set the phone on the shelf beside her. What she noticed was the absence of argument. A person who was being unjustly detained would argue, would demand to know the basis for the action, would insist on their rights and their record and their 6 years of service to this unit. Sutton looked at the two security personnel, and then she looked at the door, and she walked toward it with her hands relaxed at her sides. She looked at Maya once as she passed her in the corridor. It was a brief look. Not hostile, not frightened, more like acknowledgement. The look of one chess player to another when the board position has become clear. Maya held her gaze and said nothing. Sutton was escorted to holding. The phone she'd left on the shelf in the archive room was bagged by Barker, sealed, and placed in the evidence storage that Cole had designated for Walsh's team. The federal pressure call came at 03:15. It came through Cole's secure line, which meant whoever was on the other end had authorization to reach that number. A number that wasn't in any public directory, and that required specific clearance-level access to use. Cole was awake. He told Barker to wake him the moment anything moved on any of the monitored lines. And Barker had, and Cole was sitting at his desk with a cup of actual hot coffee when the call came in. He put it on speaker. Maya and Harrison were in the room. The voice on the other end was male, calm, and carried the specific authority register of someone who had spent a career speaking from positions of institutional power. Commander Cole, this is Deputy Director Harlan Voss, Federal Intelligence Coordination. I'm calling regarding your mission package. Cole looked at Maya. She nodded once. Deputy Director, Cole said. It's past 3 in the morning. I'm aware of the time. I'm calling because we've received a flag from your administrative wing indicating a security hold has been placed on operational staff. I need to understand what's happening at your facility. I initiated a precautionary security review, Cole said. Standard protocol when documentation anomalies are identified. The mission package timeline doesn't accommodate a security review. The deployment window opens in 72 hours. The deployment window is currently suspended. A pause. Brief, but present. Commander, the intelligence behind this package has been validated at the federal level. The source has been authenticated through Deputy Director. Cole's voice was level. I have documentation indicating that the source designator on this package matches the format of a compromised intelligence source from a prior operation. I'm not deploying my people on intelligence I can't verify. That's not a negotiable position. Another pause. Longer. What documentation? Voss said. NCIS will be on site tomorrow. At that point, I'll be in a position to share the evidentiary picture through appropriate channels. NCIS. A quality change in the voice. Not quite alarm. More like a rapid recalibration. Who contacted NCIS? That was my decision, Cole said. Commander, if you're suggesting that federal-level intelligence coordination has been, I'm not suggesting anything to you at 03:15, Deputy Director. I'm telling you that I have an NCIS agent arriving tomorrow, that my facility is secure, and that the mission is suspended until we've had the review. A long pause. I'm going to need to escalate this, Voss said. Escalate it wherever you need to, Cole said. My position doesn't change. The line disconnected. Cole set the handset down. Harrison exhaled through his nose. Voss? Maya said. She turned the name over. She'd come across it 3 times in the peripheral documentation of her father's case, not as a named participant in the operation, but in the communication logs from the oversight chain, receiving reports, routing authorizations. You know him? Cole said. I know the name. She looked at Cole. He was in the oversight chain 12 years ago, middle tier, not the person making decisions, but the person processing approvals. And now he's a deputy director. And now he's a deputy director. She paused. He called us within 2 hours of Sutton being contained. That means she got a message out before the phone was bagged. How? Harrison said. The call she made when we saw her on the camera. She must have passed something then. A signal. A contingency instruction. Something that told the other end that if she went silent, this number should be called. A dead man protocol, Harrison said. Yes. Cole looked at the phone. He just told us he knows about the security hold, which means Sutton's call went to someone who has access to our internal security flag system. The room went quiet. Someone else, Cole said slowly. Inside the administrative network. Not Sutton. Someone with access to the security monitoring system. Maya was already thinking through the access list. Security monitoring was handled through the base's technical operations section, which had 4 staff, 2 active duty, 1 contractor, 1 civilian administrator. Sutton didn't manage that section, but she'd been in this unit for 6 years, and people in units like this built relationships, built networks of mutual accommodation, built the kind of informal access that never showed up in the formal authorization logs. Barker, she said. Barker appeared. I need the access log for the base security monitoring system. Everyone who's logged in the last 72 hours. I can pull that, Barker said. Do it now. He was back in 6 minutes with a printed list. Maya scanned it. 4 names from the technical ops section. Cole, Barker himself, and 1 additional login, time-stamped at 22:47. 17 minutes after the camera had flagged Sutton in the archive room. The login was from a terminal in the East Building, registered to a civilian contractor named Mark Ridley. Ridley? Harrison said. He said it like the name tasted wrong. He's been here 4 months. He came in on what posting? Maya said. Technical systems support. Harrison's jaw was set. He came in through a federal contractor placement, Federal Coordination Office. Cole looked at Barker. Find Ridley. Sir. Barker was already moving. He was back in 4 minutes. Ridley's not in his quarters, Barker said. His badge hasn't been used since 23:15. His vehicle is gone from the lot. The 3 of them absorbed this. He ran, Harrison said. He was watching the security flag system, Maya said. When the hold went on the administrative wing, he saw it. He saw Sutton's containment initiate, and he used his system access to pull the detail and pass it up the chain, and then he left before we could close the perimeter. She looked at Cole. That's our second problem, she said. What's the first? Voss knows we have this documentation. He knows NCIS is coming, and now he knows we've identified at least part of his network inside this facility. She held Cole's gaze. He has 72 hours before the deployment window closes. He can't push it through you now. So he's going to try to either pull the mission and cut his losses or find another way to execute it. Another unit, Cole said. Another unit, or a parallel authorization chain that bypasses you entirely. Cole stood up. He was moving the way he moved when he'd made a decision. Purposeful. No wasted motion. I'm going to need Walsh here faster than 36 hours, he said. Agreed. Can you get her here in 12? I can try. He gestured at the secure line. Maya made the call. Oh. Walsh arrived at 09:45, which was 8 hours and 30 minutes after Maya's second contact call, which was faster than Maya had expected, and told her something about how prepared Walsh had been for this phone to ring. She came with 2 other agents, both younger, both carrying field equipment cases that they moved with the practiced efficiency of people who did this regularly. Walsh herself was 51, gray at the temples, with a directness of manner that read as abrasive until you understood it was just the absence of performance. She didn't do small talk. She didn't do reassurance. She looked at the evidence Cole's team had assembled, and she read through it standing up at Cole's desk, and she asked exactly 6 questions, and all 6 were the right questions. When she finished, she looked at Maya. The archive originals, she said. Still accessible? Administrative wing is on security hold. Archive room is sealed. I need 2 hours with that room. It's yours. Walsh looked at Cole. Commander, I need your operators off-base communications until I've had a chance to establish what went through your network in the last 72 hours. Cole nodded. Barker will set up an isolated line for anything mission critical. And the detained staff member. Sutton, secure holding, building 4. I'll need to speak with her in the next 2 hours. Walsh paused. Separately, just me. Cole looked at Maya. Maya shrugged one shoulder. Walsh works alone, that's not new. He nodded at Walsh. You'll have the room. Walsh picked up her field case and turned to her agents. Reyes, you're on the archive. Fontaine, I need you on the network access log. Every outbound communication from this facility in the last 96 hours. She looked at Maya. You, walk me to holding. They walked across the base in the thin morning light. The rain was still gone, the sky a pale gray-white over the inlet. Their footsteps on the gravel path were the primary sound. You look like you haven't slept, Walsh said. I've slept some. How long have you been on site? 6 days. Walsh made a sound that might have been impressed, and might have been concerned, and was probably both. And you had the archive confirmation on day 5. Day 5, yes. You moved fast. I had to. The mission package. Walsh glanced at her. Voss called Cole at 0315. Yes. Voss is not a small problem, Walsh said. He's got protection at levels that took down 2 prior investigations into the original operation. Both of those investigations ran into institutional obstruction before they could establish documented evidentiary chains. I know about both of them. Your father testified in the second one, voluntarily. He walked in without a lawyer and gave a 7-hour statement. Maya kept her eyes forward. I know. And it still went nowhere because the documentation didn't exist in a form that could survive a challenge. Walsh paused. What you have now is different. I know it is. The physical archive material, the source designator confirmation, the Sutton authentication chain. Walsh looked at her. This is the case I spent 11 months trying to build. You built it in 3 years with resources that were... She paused. What did you have to work with? What I could find, Maya said. Which was? Some contacts, a lot of time. One fragment of documentation from a naval archivist who didn't realize what he was giving me. She glanced at Walsh, and the understanding that eventually whoever was running this would run it again, because they got away with it the first time. Walsh was quiet for a few steps. Your father, she said. Does he know where you are? He knows I'm in Maine. He doesn't know the specifics. You didn't tell him. He'd have tried to stop me. She kept her voice even. He spent 12 years being responsible, being careful, not making waves because he thought if he was good enough, quiet enough, the thing would resolve itself somehow. A pause. It doesn't resolve itself. You have to go find it. Walsh didn't respond to that directly. They reached the holding facility, a low concrete building that, from outside, was indistinguishable from the base's other support structures. A security officer at the door checked Walsh's credentials and waved them through. I go in alone, Walsh said. I know. This conversation with Sutton, whatever she gives me, it stays in my chain, not yours, until I have authorization to share it. That's how it works. I understand. Walsh looked at her. You've been running this for 3 years because you needed to be in the room. You needed to be the one who found it. I understand that. She paused. Now you're going to have to let someone else be in the room for a while. Maya looked at the holding facility door. 3 years of accumulated documentation. 3 years of following a thread through systems that had been designed to make threads like this disappear. 6 days in Port Sterling in the rain, learning a unit, reading its patterns, finding its weakness. She'd found it. She'd done what she came to do. Okay, she said. It cost something to say it. Walsh could probably see that. Walsh didn't comment on it. She went through the door. The next 4 hours were the most difficult of the 6 days, because there was nothing for Maya to do. Walsh was in the holding facility. Her agents were in the archive and on the network logs. Cole was managing the unit's operational status and handling the communication hold. Harrison was running the base with the particular focused competence of someone who understood that what was happening around them required them to do their job exceptionally well in the immediate perimeter. Maya sat in the briefing room with a cup of coffee and her notebook and ran through every step she'd taken since arriving and looked for the places where she might have moved too fast or too slow or left something exposed. She found 2. The first was the Ridley variable, the contractor she hadn't known about, whose exit had given Voss the detail he needed to make the 3 a.m. call. She'd identified Sutton correctly, but hadn't run a broad enough scan of who else in the facility had anomalous access. That was a gap. It hadn't cost them the operation, but it had cost them the clean perimeter she'd been trying to maintain. The second was the question of what Sutton had said on the phone during that archived call. Whether the contingency she'd passed was just, I've been identified, or whether it included more specific information about what Maya had, how much of the evidentiary picture had been communicated up the chain. If Voss knew specifically what was in the physical archive, he might try to challenge the documentation's chain of custody. If he only knew there was documentation, he'd challenge the scope of the investigation. 2 different legal strategies. 2 different preparation responses. She was still turning this over when Evan Brooks appeared in the briefing room doorway at 1400. He had 2 sandwiches from the mess and looked like he hadn't fully processed the last 12 hours. "You haven't eaten," he said. "I have." "When?" She thought about it. "This morning." He put one of the sandwiches on the table in front of her and sat down. She ate half of it without meaning to, which told her she'd been hungrier than she'd registered. "Are you going to tell me what's happening?" he said. "Walsh's team is conducting a review. Cole has the unit on communication hold. That's what I can tell you. That's the official version. That's the version that's accurate and doesn't require authorization to share." He nodded. He picked at his sandwich. He had the contained, slightly restless look of a young operator who was good enough to know something significant was happening and disciplined enough not to push past what he was being told. "Is it going to be okay?" he said. Maya looked at him. It was a simple question, the kind of question you could say was naive, coming from someone who'd been in this unit for 8 months in a situation they didn't fully understand. But it wasn't naive. It was the question underneath all the other questions, the one that actually mattered. "I think so," she said. "I believe the answer is yes. But I won't tell you I'm certain, because I'm not." He nodded. That seemed to be enough. "Your father," he said, "the one who taught you everything." She looked at him. "Is this—" He paused, chose words carefully. "Is this connected to him? What's happening here?" She looked at the table for a moment. "Yes," she said. He didn't push further, understood, somehow, that the single word was the complete answer, not a door cracked open, but the whole of what she was willing to give. They ate in silence for a few minutes. "Brooks," she said. "Yeah." "The day you told me about your father, the firefighter." "Yeah." "You said you don't walk away from the thing you came to do." "That's his line. I was quoting him." "I know." She looked at him. "I've been thinking about it." He waited. "He was right," she said. Evan looked at his sandwich. Something moved in his face, a brief, unguarded thing that he didn't try to manage. "Yeah," he said quietly. He usually was. Walsh came out of the holding facility at 15:30. She found Maya in the briefing room, and she had an expression that was controlled in the way of someone managing news. She sat down across from Maya and put her hands flat on the table. "Sutton talked," she said. Maya waited. "Not everything. She's smart enough to hold back what she can use as leverage in the charging conversation, but enough." Walsh looked at her. The source designator in the new mission package wasn't just formatted to match the original. It was the original. The same asset code, reactivated through a federal processing node that Voss controls. "He kept it active," Maya said. "For 12 years he kept the asset code in the system. Dormant, but present. He needed it to stay available because the operation that generated it was never fully concluded. There were remaining targets in the original mission set that were never actioned." Walsh paused. "The new mission was the second phase of the original operation. That's what this was." Maya sat with this. "The original operation was 12 years ago," she said. "Phase 1. My father's team went in on fabricated intelligence, hit a compromised position, took casualties. Mission declared failed. Record written to place the failure on command decisions." She looked at Walsh. Phase 2 was being staged now. New team, same target set, same fabricated source. "With a new administrator inside the unit to manage the authentication," Walsh said. "Sutton was recruited 18 months ago, approached through a contact in her previous posting, brought in here, positioned over the documentation chain. She wasn't in the unit 12 years ago. No, she's the replacement infrastructure. The original internal contact from 12 years ago is, we don't know yet. Sutton doesn't know, or says she doesn't. But there was someone inside the unit then, same function, who managed the original authentication and then left. Voss brought Sutton in to rebuild the capability. For Phase 2. Yes." Maya looked at the table. The picture was complete now. All the fragments she'd been assembling for 3 years, the final pieces from the last 6 days, the thing she'd been moving toward. It was, in some ways, exactly what she'd expected. In another way, it was worse. Because Phase 1 hadn't been an isolated event. It had been the first half of something, and every year her father had spent carrying the weight of that report, Every year he'd worked his maintenance rounds at a high school in Portland and coached track kids on his lunch break. All of that time, the people who'd written that report had been waiting to finish what they'd started. Walsh looked at her carefully. "I'm issuing a federal hold on Voss through NCIS Emergency Authority," she said. "That goes through now. He'll be in federal custody within 3 hours." Maya nodded. "The mission package will be formally voided through the command chain with a documented evidentiary basis," Walsh continued. "Cole's unit will be fully cleared of any operational implication." "And my father's case," Walsh paused. "The documentation you've assembled, combined with Sutton's statement and the archive material, is sufficient to initiate a formal review of the after-action report from 12 years ago." She looked at Maya directly. "That review will take time. The military process isn't fast, but the evidentiary basis for challenging the report exists now in a form that can survive a challenge, which it didn't before." Maya was quiet. "It's not the same as cleared today," Walsh said. "I want to be honest with you about what the timeline looks like. It's months, probably. Possibly longer if Voss challenges the charge." "I understand." "But it moves," Walsh said. "For the first time in 12 years, it actually moves." Maya looked at her hands on the table. For 3 years, she'd been building toward a moment that she'd imagined many different ways. Sometimes as a door opening, sometimes as a weightlifting, sometimes simply as the satisfaction of a thing being finished. She hadn't imagined it feeling like this. Substantial and incomplete at the same time, real and somehow still distant. Her father was in Portland. He'd be home from the school by now, probably making something simple for dinner in the kitchen of the house he'd lived in for 8 years. And he didn't know what had happened today, and he wouldn't know for a while. And the formal clearing of his name was months away through a process that would ask things of him before it gave him anything back. But it moved. Walsh was right about that. "Okay," Maya said. Walsh stood up, put out her hand. Maya stood and shook it. "You did good work," Walsh said. "It was factual, not congratulatory. The assessment of one professional for another." "So did you," Maya said. 11 months and you filed it properly." Walsh almost smiled. It wasn't a common expression on her. She picked up her field case and walked toward the door. "Bennett," she said without turning. "Yeah." "Call your father." She walked out. Maya stood in the briefing room for a moment. The afternoon light through the window was the first actual sunlight she'd seen since arriving in Port Sterling, thin and pale, coming off the inlet at an angle that made the water look almost silver. She pulled out her phone, looked at the contact entry she hadn't called in 6 days. "Dad." She stood there for a moment longer. Then she walked out of the briefing room, through the corridor and out the side door onto the gravel path that ran along the edge of the base toward the inlet. She stood in the thin, cold sunlight with the water in front of her and the trees on the far bank and the specific quiet of a place after something large has moved through it. She called the number. It rang twice. Maya. His voice, the same voice it had always been, roughened slightly by years, but the same fundamental register, careful, present, the voice of a man who paid attention. "Hey, Dad," she said. A pause. "You okay?" he said. She looked at the water. "Yeah," she said. "I'm okay." A breath. "I found something. I need to tell you about it." The inlet was flat and silver in the afternoon light. Somewhere behind her, on the base, she could hear the sound of the unit resuming its normal rhythm. Voices, footsteps, the distant mechanical sound of vehicles moving across the lot. Life continuing after the thing that had suspended it. Her father was quiet on the other end of the line, the way he'd been quiet for 12 years, patient, holding, not pushing, she told him. He didn't say anything for a long time after she finished. She talked for almost 20 minutes, standing at the edge of the inlet with the thin sunlight moving across the water, and she'd told him everything in the order it happened. Not the 3-year version, not the compressed summary, but the actual sequence. The way a person told something to someone who deserved the full weight of it. The armory. The archive. Sutton. Walsh. Voss. She didn't soften the parts that were hard. She didn't soften the part about Cole's signature on the after-action report, or the part about how long the operation had been running, or the part about what Phase 2 would have meant if it had deployed. When she finished, there was a silence on the line that she recognized. She'd grown up with that silence, the particular quiet of a man processing something too large to respond to immediately, holding it at arm's length to keep it from knocking him down before he was ready. "Dad," she said. "I'm here," he said. Another few seconds. "You've been doing this for 3 years," he said. "Yes." "By yourself?" "Mostly." Walsh had the prior case file. Some of the foundational work was already done. "Maya." His voice shifted. Not angry, not quite. Something more complicated. "You should have told me. You would have tried to stop me." "Yes. Which is why I didn't tell you." A breath on the line. "That's—" He stopped, started again. "You could have been hurt. If these people knew what you were building, I was careful. Being careful isn't the same as being safe. I know that." "Do you?" She looked at the water. A gull was crossing the inlet at low altitude, moving against the wind with the particular focused efficiency of something that did this every day and had no opinion about it. "Yes," she said. "I do. I was never completely safe, I knew that." A pause. "But I wasn't going to stop." He was quiet again. The silence was different. She could hear him working through it, the way you heard someone physically move in a confined space, the specific sound of a decision being reached or a thing being set down. "The after-action report," he said. His voice had changed again, quieter, more careful, the voice he used for things he didn't say often. "The review. It'll take time." Walsh was honest about that. Months, probably. But the evidentiary basis is there now in a form that can survive a challenge. What does that mean, for the record? It means the report can be formally contested. It means the conclusions in it can be challenged with documentation rather than testimony alone. She paused. It means that eventually, not tomorrow, not next month, but eventually, the record will say what actually happened. Another silence. 12 years, he said. Not with bitterness, with something that was more like exhaustion, the specific exhaustion of a weight that has been carried so long the body has forgotten what it was like not to carry it. "I know." "No," she said. "I stopped expecting it to move," he said. "I genuinely—" He stopped. "I made my peace with it not moving. I thought that was the healthy thing to do. Just accept what was on paper and move forward." "That was a reasonable thing to do." "But you didn't do that." "No." She heard him exhale, long, slow. "Why not?" he said. She watched the gull reach the far bank and disappear into the tree line. "Because it wasn't fair," she said. "And I knew it wasn't fair when I was 12 years old watching you read that report, and I couldn't—" She stopped. This was the part she hadn't fully articulated to anyone, including herself. "I couldn't make my peace with something that was wrong just because making peace was easier." A very long pause. "Your mother used to say the same thing about you," he said finally. Maya didn't respond. Her mother had died when she was 16, and her father had raised her through the worst of his professional aftermath while managing the worst of his personal grief, and neither of them talked about that directly very often. "She said you were the one person in the family who couldn't let a wrong thing go," he said. "She thought it would be hard for you. She was right." A beat. "She also thought it was the best thing about you." Maya stood on the gravel path with the phone against her ear and looked at the flat silver water. She didn't say anything. She didn't have anything to say to that was equal to it. "Come home when you can," her father said. "I'll make dinner." "Soon," she said. "Not yet. There's still— Walsh needs me on site for a few more days for the documentation phase." "Okay." A pause. "Maya." "Yeah." "Thank you," he said. It was 2 words, flat and simple. The way he said everything that mattered most. She pressed her thumbnail into her palm and breathed. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Wait until it actually moves." "It's already moving," he said. "You said so yourself." She had said that. She ended the call and stood at the inlet until the cold got through her jacket, and then she went back inside. Harlan Voss was taken into federal custody at 1847. Walsh sent Maya a single-line message through the secure channel. "Voss in custody. Hold confirmed federal." That was all. No commentary, no elaboration. Walsh communicated the way she worked, with the minimum necessary to convey the fact. Maya read the message in the briefing room and then set her phone down and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Voss being in custody didn't feel like what she'd expected it to feel like. She'd expected something larger, some internal shift, some release of pressure that had been building for years. What she actually felt was more like the sensation of a low-grade hum going quiet. Something she hadn't consciously noticed until its absence made the room feel different. She picked up her phone again and went to find Cole. Cole was in his office. It was evening now, past 1900, and the base had settled into the lower frequency activity of end of day. Essential personnel only, reduced movement, the specific texture of a facility that had been through something and was beginning to process it. He was standing at the window again. The inlet was dark. No silver left in it, just black water and the tree line and the first stars showing through breaks in the cloud cover. He heard her knock on the open door and turned. "Voss," she said. "I heard." She came in and sat down. He stayed at the window. "The mission package is formally voided," he said. "Walsh's team completed the federal documentation about an hour ago. It's on record." "Good." "Mark Ridley," he paused. "The contractor who accessed the security system and ran. NCIS picked him up at a bus terminal in Bangor at 1500. He didn't get far." "I wasn't a professional," Maya said. "He was a convenience. Someone Voss had in a position for this specific purpose. When the situation changed, he panicked." "He gave Walsh everything," Cole said, "apparently in considerable detail and very quickly." "That tracks." Cole turned from the window and sat in the chair behind his desk. Not his command posture, something more worn than that. He looked like what he was, a man who'd run a unit for 9 years and had spent the last 18 hours confronting what that meant. "I want to ask you something," he said. "Okay." "The last 6 days, the way you came in here," he paused. "The file, the armory, the whole sequence. You built this with the understanding that you might not find what you were looking for, that the archive documentation might not have been here, that the source designator might not have matched." "Yes." "And if it hadn't?" She looked at him. "Then I would have had a clean armory and a thorough maintenance inspection report, and I would have moved on. To the next possibility." "To the next possibility, yes." He looked at her for a moment. "How many possibilities were there before this one?" 4 prior postings, she said, in 3 years. Different units, different administrative chains. Each one had some element of the peripheral record that I needed to verify or eliminate. "So you've been doing this systematically for 3 years, moving through the network one position at a time." "Yes," he exhaled. "When you got here and Harrison gave you the armory, I would have found a way into that room regardless," she said. "The armory was convenient, it was faster, but I would have gotten there." He almost smiled. It didn't quite make it, but it was close. "Your father," he said. She waited. "The review process," he said. "I want to submit a supplementary statement, a formal one, through my command chain, attesting to the conditions under which I co-signed the original report." He paused. "I signed it under pressure from Voss's oversight chain. I didn't know the source had been fabricated. I didn't ask enough questions, and I should have." He held her gaze. "That's in the record either way now, because Walsh's investigation will surface it. But I want to submit it voluntarily, my own account, in my own words." Maya looked at him. "That's your decision," she said. "I'm telling you because it affects your father's review process. A voluntary supplementary statement from the co-signing officer carries more evidentiary weight than a compelled one." "I know. So I'm asking," he said carefully, "if it's something you think is the right call." She looked at him for a moment. He was asking her permission, in some sense, not formally, not officially, but in the way that mattered. He was asking if she thought this was the right thing to do rather than just the self-protective thing to do. "It's the right call," she said. He nodded. "I'll have it drafted by tomorrow." The office was quiet. Through the window behind him, she could see the stars more clearly now. The clouds thinning at last, the sky opening up over the dark water. "What happens to the unit?" she said. "Walsh's team will complete their review of the network and the administrative chain. We'll have a period of formal operational stand-down while the documentation is processed. Probably 3 to 4 weeks," he paused. "Then we rebuild. New administrative structure, proper oversight protocols, a few personnel changes." He looked at the window. "Units survive this. It's hard and it takes time, but they survive." "Your people are good," she said. Most of them, yes. He looked back at her. Some of them are better than I knew. She understood he wasn't only talking about the unit. What? She found Harrison at the range at 2100. He was alone, running dry fire drills in the dark, or near dark, one light on at the far end of the lane, enough to see the target silhouette. She stood in the doorway and watched him for a moment before he registered her presence and lowered the weapon. Couldn't sleep, he said. It's 2100. I don't sleep before midnight on operational days. He cleared the weapon and set it on the bench. Good habit to break, probably. She walked to the bench and stood beside him, looking at the target at the end of the lane. From here, in the low light, the silhouette was more suggestion than shape. Voss is in custody, she said. I heard. He was quiet. Ridley, too. Yes. He was quiet for another moment. My first year in this unit, he said, we ran a joint exercise with a federal coordination team. Voss was the oversight lead. He paused. He gave a speech, talked about the responsibility of the command structure to protect its people. I thought he was... He stopped. I thought he was the kind of person this was all about. The mission, the people. He probably believed it when he said it, Maya said. People like that usually start believing it. That's worse somehow. Yes, she said. It is. Harrison picked up the weapon again, not to fire, just the habitual handling of it, the thing hands did when a mind was working through something. The operators who would have gone on that mission, he said. 9 days from now. If you hadn't... He stopped. Don't, she said. I'm not... I know what you're doing, she said. You're running the counterfactual. What would have happened if I hadn't come? Don't do it. You can't operate in the counterfactual. It's not real. He looked at her. What's real is that the mission didn't go, she said. The operators are fine. That's what you keep. He set the weapon down again. Bennett, he said. Harrison. I was an ass to you for the first 2 days. We've covered this. I know, I'm saying it again because... He paused. Because I want you to understand it wasn't just the standard new person skepticism. I came at you specifically, the way you were new, and you didn't fit the picture I had, and I decided that meant you were a problem. She looked at him. I do that, he said. I decide who people are before I know them. He made a sound that was close to a laugh and not quite. It's a bad habit in a profession that's supposed to be about accurate assessment. You corrected it, she said, after you spent 12 hours cleaning my armory. It was a useful 12 hours. He shook his head. The report, he said. You were already in the middle of the investigation before I even gave you the armory. I was going to find a way to get into those records regardless. But you didn't fight me. You didn't argue. You didn't go around me. You just... He looked at the target. You just did the thing and used it. Fighting you would have told you I had a specific interest, she said, which would have made you look more carefully at what that interest was, which I didn't want yet. So accepting the order was tactical. Partly. What was the other part? She was quiet for a moment. 34 rifles and machine guns that needed actual cleaning, she said. That maintenance record was a genuine problem, regardless of what it turned out to mean. He looked at her, and this time the almost laugh actually made it. You know, he said, most people who've done what you've done would want something from it. Recognition, a promotion, some kind of official acknowledgement that they were right and everyone else was wrong. I'm sure the NCIS review will have something to say about that. That's not what I mean. He paused. I mean from us, from this unit, from me. She looked at the target at the end of the lane. I wanted the operation stopped, she said. I wanted the documentation in a form that moves the review of my father's case. Those are the things I came here for. A pause. That's what I've got. That's all? She thought about it honestly. I wanted to know if I could do it, she said. Build it from almost nothing over 3 years and then come into a closed system that had every reason not to trust me and make it work. And apparently I can. He was quiet for a moment. Then, your grip on the transition drill, the support hand. She looked at him. I want to show you a modification, he said, for shooting off a low barricade. The same principle, but the application's different. It's useful in CQB. She looked at him for a moment. Tomorrow? She said. Tomorrow works. The unit gathered informally in the common room on the fourth morning after Walsh's arrival. Not a formation, not an ordered assembly. People just ended up there, so some with coffee, some without, some still in PT gear from morning runs. Cole was present, but not in front of the room. He was sitting at one of the tables, which itself said something. Walsh had departed the previous evening, taking the physical evidence with her in a federal transport vehicle that had arrived at 1700 and left at 1815. She'd shaken Cole's hand. She'd given Maya a look that communicated several things without saying any of them, and then she'd gotten into the vehicle, and the vehicle had gone. What remained was the unit. 23 operators, 2 support staff, 1 commander, and Maya, still assigned, still billeted in Building C, technically present in an operational capacity that had been formalized by Cole after the first day and hadn't been reversed. Nobody had summoned the common room gathering. It accumulated the way gatherings accumulated in small, closed communities when something significant had moved through. Not because anyone decided it should happen, but because it was the natural response to needing to be in the same space while things settled. Cole let it run for a few minutes before he stood up. He didn't go to the front of the room. He just stood up from his table. "I'm not going to do a formal debrief," he said. "Walsh's team has what they need and the documentation is in federal hands. What I want to say is something different." The room was quiet. "We've been sitting with something for the last several days that some of you know in detail and some of you have only partial information about," he said. "The short version, which I can now give you because the federal hold is lifted, is that the mission package that came through last week was built on fabricated intelligence. The fabrication was facilitated through our administrative chain. NCIS has the full picture and the responsible parties are in federal custody." He paused. "The reason that mission didn't deploy," he said, "is that someone identified the problem before it became a disaster. That someone arrived here 6 days before the mission package hit our board, with no visible history and no apparent support, and proceeded to do what she came here to do without asking for anything she hadn't earned." 23 people looked at Maya. She didn't look away, and she didn't look particularly comfortable with the attention. "I made a decision when she arrived," Cole said. "I looked at a one-page file and I made a judgment based on that one page. The judgment wasn't wrong, as it turned out, but I want to be honest about the fact that it could have been, because the one page told me almost nothing." He paused. "What actually told me who she was what she did." Okereke, from the front of the room. "Sir, what was her clearance level when she came in?" Cole looked at Maya. She could answer this now. The hold on her background was being formally cleared as part of Walsh's documentation process, and Cole had briefed her that morning that the seal on her prior assignment would be partially lifted for internal unit disclosure. "I came in as a lieutenant on administrative transfer," she said. "Before that I was in a program that doesn't appear in public records." She paused. "My father was in the program before me. He taught me the foundations when I was a kid, and I completed the formal qualification when I was 23. "What program?" someone asked from the back. "It's not one I can name in a general briefing," she said. "What I can tell you is that the insignia on my arm isn't decorative." Harrison, standing to her left, made a sound. It wasn't quite a laugh. It was the sound of someone who'd stood in the armory 3 mornings ago and had already done the recalibration. Cole looked at the room. "I want to say one more thing," he said. "And then I'm going to let this be what it is, which is informal." He looked at Maya. "I spent 9 years running this unit. In that time, I've seen a lot of people come through this door. Some of them were extraordinary. Some of them turned out to be less than I thought. And some of them," he paused, "some of them were exactly what the situation required, at the moment it required it. And you don't always get to recognize that in the moment. Sometimes you recognize it afterward." He held her gaze. "I recognized it afterward," he said. "I'm saying so now." The room was quiet. Maya looked at Cole and didn't say anything, because there wasn't anything to say that was equal to it, and she'd learned over years that not all silences needed to be filled. Evan Brooks, from 2 tables away, raised his coffee cup slightly. It was a small gesture. Not performative, just acknowledgement. The kind of thing a young operator did when he wanted to say something but understood that the moment didn't call for words. She looked at him and gave a small nod. Harrison put his coffee down on the table beside her. "Transition drill at 1400, he said. "If you're still interested." "I'm still interested," she said. 3 weeks later, the formal operational review concluded. The unit stood down for 9 days of administrative restructuring, during which Cole rebuilt the administrative chain with a combination of existing personnel and 2 incoming transfers who came with files that were, this time, thoroughly examined. The after-action report review for Daniel Bennett's mission was formally initiated by the Naval Records Division on a Tuesday, triggered by the evidentiary package Walsh submitted and Cole's voluntary supplementary statement. Maya was at the base when the notification came through Walsh's channel. She read it standing in the equipment cage with a coffee going cold in her other hand. The notification was 3 sentences. It used the specific bureaucratic language of a process beginning, not a result, not an acknowledgement of error, just the opening of a door that had been sealed for 12 years. She read it 3 times. Then she called her father. He answered on the first ring, which meant he'd been expecting the call. "It's initiated," she said. A silence. "Okay," he said. His voice was steady. Walsh said the documentation package is strong. Cole's statement is voluntary and detailed. She thinks the review board will be thorough. How long? She said 4 to 6 months for the initial determination. Could be longer if it goes to a second review. "Okay," he said again. She could hear something in his voice that she couldn't quite name. Not quite relief, not quite grief. Something that occupied the space between them. The particular emotional register of a man who had stopped expecting something and was now being asked to start again. "Dad," she said, "I'm here. It's going to be okay." A pause. Long enough that she thought the line might have dropped. "I know," he said finally. "I know it is." She was standing in the equipment cage and the afternoon light was coming through the high window, the way it had been coming through the armory window 3 weeks ago, when she'd been finishing the last of the rifles at 4 in the morning. The same quality of light, the same cold, the same inlet, the same water somewhere beyond the walls. "When do you come home?" he said. "End of the week," she said. "Walsh needs me for 1 more documentation session. Then I'm done here." "I'll make something good," he said. "You always say that, and then you make the same 3 things. The same 3 good things." "That's fair," she said. On her last morning at Port Sterling, she ran the perimeter. Not the base perimeter, the longer route, 3 miles along the coastal path that followed the inlet from the base's eastern edge south to the point where the land curved and you could see the open ocean beyond the last headland. She ran it in the gray pre-dawn, the water black on her left, the spruce trees pressing close on her right, the gravel path marked by the white rocks that someone had placed at the edge every 20 meters. She ran it at a pace that was harder than it needed to be because she was someone who used the body to process things the mind couldn't fully get to, and there were things from the last 3 weeks that she hadn't fully gotten to yet. She thought about her father at 26, commanding a 12-man team into a position built on false intelligence. She thought about the 12 years that followed. She thought about what it cost a person to carry something wrong inside a life they were otherwise trying to live correctly. She thought about Cole at his window, about Walsh's 11 months and her filed report, about Harrison in the armory doorway at 0545, holding the inspection report and going through 3 different things in 4 seconds. She thought about Evan Brooks on the floor of the armory at 12:40 in the morning, sitting against the wall while she worked, not because he needed to be there, but because he was the kind of person who stayed. She ran to the point where the headland curved and the open ocean came into view. The sea was gray this morning, a particular gray that matched the sky so completely that the horizon line almost disappeared. There were white caps far out, small and numerous. The surface choppy from wind she couldn't feel at this distance. A single vessel was visible on the water, a working boat of some kind, moving south, taking its time. She stopped at the edge of the point and put her hands on her knees and breathed. 3 years of work ending here, at this headland, looking at this ocean. The mission was stopped. The documentation was in federal hands. The people responsible were in custody or in process. The review was initiated. Her father's name was moving through a system that had kept it stationary for 12 years. It wasn't complete. Walsh had been right about the timeline. 4 to 6 months, possibly longer. Her father would have to give testimony again, would have to re-enter a process that had hurt him before, would have to hold himself steady through another sequence of institutional procedures before the thing at the end of it. The formal correction, the record that said what actually happened, finally existed. That wasn't complete, but it was moving, and moving was something that hadn't existed before. She straightened up, looked at the ocean for another moment. Then she turned and ran back. Harrison was at the vehicle lot when she came back from the run. He was loading gear into a transport case, working with the efficient economy of someone who'd done the same task many times. He looked up when she came across the gravel. "Last day," he said. "Last day." He looked at her for a moment. Then he reached into the side pocket of the case and pulled out a small object and held it out. It was a patch. Unit 14's insignia, the anchor and trident design that was embroidered on the left shoulder of every operator's field jacket. "That's not mine to take," she said. "Cole authorized it," he said. "It's not a formal posting gift. It's not—" He paused. "It's just a patch. From the unit." She took it, looked at it in her palm for a moment. The stitching was slightly worn at one edge, which meant it had been taken from a used jacket. Someone had worn this. "Whose?" she said. "Mine," he said. "From my first year here." She looked at him. "You can tell me it's too much," he said. "I won't be offended." "It's not too much," she said. He nodded, went back to loading the case. "The transition drill," she said. "The barricade modification you showed me." "Yeah. It's better than what I was doing." "Most things are better when you adjust for the actual conditions," he said. She pocketed the patch. "Take care of them," she said. "Always do." He paused. "You going back to a desk?" "No," she said. "Back in the field?" "Walsh offered me a consulting position, NCIS, working documentation cases with a field component." She looked at the tree line. "I haven't decided yet." "What are you leaning toward?" She thought about it honestly. "Toward yes," she said. "Because there are other cases, other documentation trails that didn't get followed the right way. Other people carrying things they shouldn't have to carry alone." Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." He extended his hand. She shook it. His grip was the same as it had been every day she'd been here. Firm, direct, the handshake of someone who'd decided something and meant it. "Bennett," he said. "Harrison." He went back to the case. She walked toward Building C to collect her bag. She passed Evan Brooks in the corridor outside the briefing room. He was carrying a stack of training manuals and nearly walked into her before he registered she was there. "Oh." He stopped, looked at the bag over her shoulder. "Today?" "This morning." He shifted the manuals to one arm. He had the look of someone who'd prepared something to say, and then found that now the moment had arrived, none of it felt right. "I hope it goes the way you need it to," he said finally. "The thing with your father, the review." "Thank you." "And I hope—" He stopped again. Something moved in his face. "I hope you find what comes next. After this. I think it'll be something good." She looked at him. 24 years old, 8 months in, carrying his father's line about not walking away from the thing you came to do. He'd started to believe he belonged here, she thought. Sometime in the last 3 weeks, without making a declaration about it, he'd started to settle into his own competence the way a person settled into a chair that fit. "You're going to be good at this," she said. He blinked. "At what?" "This." She gestured around them. The unit, the work, all of it. "You've got good instincts, and you ask the right questions, and you don't leave things." He was quiet for a moment. "Your dad would have said the same," she said. "I think." Something moved through his expression, brief, unguarded, the kind of thing that didn't have a name, but that everybody who'd ever lost someone recognized. "Yeah," he said quietly. He would have. She touched his arm once, a brief, light pressure, there and gone. Then she walked past him and down the corridor and out the side door and across the gravel lot to her rental car. She put her bag in the trunk, got behind the wheel, started the engine. She sat for a moment the way she'd sat on the first day, engine running, looking at the building through the windshield. The same building, the same cameras, the same guard post. But the man at the guard post was paying attention now. Both of them were. She noticed that. She put the car in reverse, pulled out of the lot, and turned onto the 2-lane highway heading south. The spruce trees pressed close on both sides. The inlet ran alongside the road for the first mile, visible in gaps between the trees, gray and flat and still. She drove at a steady pace. No rush. Her father was in Portland. He was at the school by now, making his rounds. carrying his keys on the clip at his hip the way he'd always carried everything, efficiently, without comment. At lunch, he'd go out to the track and watch the kids run and tell them things about intervals that he'd learned before most of them were born. And somewhere in the federal processing system, a review had been initiated. It was moving. She reached the first junction and turned south. Some things can't be fixed quickly. Some wrongs take years to reach the right hands. And the people carrying them have to decide every day whether they're going to keep walking toward the thing that corrected it or stop and make peace with an injustice that doesn't deserve peace. The decision doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a guarantee. It only asks if you're willing to keep going when every system you can see is telling you to stop. The strongest people aren't the ones who never get knocked down. They're the ones who decide quietly and without asking for credit that the wrong thing